Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson. Today we're listening to Insane Twists.
Stepping into the world after graduating college is like unlocking a new chapter in life for many young adults, and that's precisely what 21-year-old Grace Mullane from Essex aimed to do after earning her degree from Lincoln University. She embarked on a thrilling journey, exploring different places and meeting new people across the world. However, the excitement turned into a tragic event just before her 22nd birthday on December 1st, 2018.
I saw that she was lying on the floor. I saw that she had blood coming from her nose. I screamed, I yelled out at her, and she was cold.
Did you kill Grace Mullane? Who's the man seen engaging in various unusual activities? What exactly happened to Grace on the evening of December 1st, 2018? The answer to these questions would take us to Auckland, the biggest city in New Zealand, and famous for its beautiful harbors, diverse culture, and lively city atmosphere. People from all over the world are drawn to its mix of modern living and natural wonders. One such tourist from England, 21-year-old Grace Mullane, also visited to experience the soothing nature and delicious food that Auckland has to offer. Sadly, in 2018, Auckland became known for a terrible crime that happened to Grace during her visit. Imagine a regular Tinder date turning into the worst mistake of your life. Well, that's what happened with 21-year-old Grace Mullane on December 1st, 2018. But before we dive into that, let's learn a bit about her. Grace Mullane was born on December 2nd, 1996 in Essex, England, to parents David and Gillian. She was the youngest of three children, with two older brothers named Michael and Declan. Grace was a cheerful and outgoing person who loved her family. She had a sociable and cheerful personality who always tried to make the most of life.
We met when we were 10 years old, just starting secondary school together. And from the off, she just seemed like a really bubbly, kind, caring person. We spent sort of all of our break times, lunch times together. She was always looking after me. She was always the one to take care of everyone else.
After finishing high school, Grace went on to the University of Lincoln to study advertising and marketing for her bachelor's degree. During her time at university, she took up different jobs to save as much money as she could. But it wasn't just about work. She made lots of new friends and built strong connections. One of her friends, Jeff Kenworthy, highlighted how vibrant and lively Grace was during this time.
She was in Lincoln in university. We arranged to meet there. She was very polite. She was very kind. We didn't hold back from taking the mic. I felt like we had a little bit of banter.
Grace had a passion for painting because she was super creative and artistic. She spent a lot of time creating paintings and loved sharing them with everyone. People admired how thoughtful Grace was in expressing herself through her art.
She showed me some of her portraits when I was at her dorm. I was impressed.
In September 2018, Grace happily finished her degree and got all dressed up in a cap and gown with pride. Instead of diving straight into grown-up responsibilities, she was thrilled for a new adventure before moving on to the next chapter of her life. She'd saved up for a whole year to embark on a backpacking tour and was all set for the exciting journey ahead. After graduating, Grace was known for her compassion and kindness. Before embarking on her trip, she did something really special. She chopped off her hair and donated it to the Little Princess Trust, which makes wigs for kids suffering from cancer. In October 2018, filled with excitement, Grace left her family home and headed off on her travels. The spirited graduate took off from Heathrow Airport and was ready for her first big adventure. For 6 weeks, Grace explored Peru on a backpacking adventure in South America. Surrounded by fellow travelers from all over the world, she immersed herself in the beauty of the country. Even though her time there was short, she treasured every moment, knowing it was just the start of her global journey. Grace excitedly shared every picture with her family, telling them how much she was loving every bit of her trip. On November 19th, 2018, Grace arrived in New Zealand, eager to explore the stunning beauty of the North Island. Unlike her planned trip in Peru, this time in New Zealand was a solo adventure, giving her the freedom to enjoy the experience at her own pace.
New Zealand's a beautiful place. It's the most picturesque thing you could ever imagine. It's a very safe feeling place as well. Grace was just like everyone else you kind of meet when you're backpacking. You're all out there for the same adventure. I kind of continued exploring. I didn't feel like I'd seen enough. Grace went back to Auckland.
After enjoying 10 wonderful days exploring the North Island, Grace decided to celebrate her upcoming 22nd birthday in the lively city of Auckland. She arrived in Auckland on November 30th, 2018, just 2 days before her big day. Staying in a popular hostel called the Base Backpackers Lodge on Queen Street, she shared a room with fellow travelers. That evening, Grace socialized with some new friends she met at the hostel, ready for a memorable birthday in the heart of New Zealand's largest metropolis. However, having an early night, Grace decided to browse the popular dating site Tinder while lying in bed. She was looking to connect with local people and make new connections during her stay.
A lot of people do online dating. When you're travelling, that's how a lot of people meet nowadays. And it can be a quick way to find someone that you maybe have some interest with. You know, you can quickly talk to them and have a phone call where they say, I'm travelling here, could you show me around here?
On December 1st, 2018, at around 5:37 p.m., Grace stepped out of the hostel for a date night in the city center, wearing a knee-length black dress, white shoes, and carrying a cute little handbag. She had exciting plans to meet someone special she'd matched with on Tinder. At first, Grace had been a bit unsure about the meetup, but after some more chatting, she and her date decided, why not? They made a plan to grab some drinks, and the chosen spot was none other than Sky City, a hip entertainment complex and casino just a stone's throw away from her hostel. Just before her date showed up, Grace took a photo in front of the Sky City Christmas tree and sent it to her family back home. After sending the message, Grace looked around and focused on her phone. It was around 5:54 p.m. when a guy in sneakers, jeans, and a light blue unbuttoned shirt walked up to her. They shared a quick hug, and then the two of them headed to a burger joint on the first floor. The evening was rolling, with no hint of the unexpected events that would follow. Here they had dinner, got to know each other better, and the connection between them clicked instantly. The vibe was so good that they decided to keep the date going. Their next stop was a Mexican bar in the complex to enjoy a few more margaritas. They got to the Mexican bar just after 7 p.m., spending the next hour and a half sipping on drinks and having a good time together. The night was turning out to be a blast for Grace on her pre-birthday celebration. At around 8:30 p.m., as you can see in the video, the man paid for the drinks while chatting with the bartender. After that, he and Grace headed out for their next destination, ready to keep the fun going on their evening adventure. About an hour later, they swung by a place called Blue Stone Room, a bar just a few minutes away from the man's apartment. At one point, Grace got up from the table, and for some strange reason, the man picked up her handbag and started searching for something. It was pretty suspicious, especially since they'd just met for the first time. It was during their time there when things got cozy as the two started flirting for about an hour. It seemed like a regular casual date with nothing out of the ordinary. When the man left the table and went to the bathroom, Grace seized the moment to text one of her friends back in England. She gushed about how great the date was going and how they connected. Being excited, she promised to spill all the details in the morning. Sadly, that follow-up message never arrived, and tragically, her friend never heard from Grace again. The next morning was December 2nd, 2018, the day of Grace's 22nd birthday. The day kicked off with a flood of text messages and missed calls from her loved ones, all excited to wish her a happy birthday.
I messaged her on Snapchat saying happy birthday, hope you're having a lovely time.
As the morning turned into afternoon and then evening, the festive wishes for Grace's birthday went unanswered. She wasn't picking up either of her two phones. Both were going straight to voicemail. She wasn't responding to any messages or sharing pictures of her trip to let everyone know how she was doing.
You know, not getting a reply for a few days, I didn't really think much of it because I knew that she was travelling. When it came out that she hadn't, responded to anyone, hadn't called anyone, I think that's when sort of the worry started to set in.
Initially, Grace's parents weren't too worried at first due to the 13-hour time difference between the UK and New Zealand. They figured she might be out celebrating her birthday in an area with no cell phone reception. However, as hours turned into days with no word from their daughter, the silence became more pronounced and concerning. Grace was known for keeping her loved ones updated on her travels, never missing a day without checking in. Her sudden disappearance on her birthday was out of character, and the growing silence felt ominous to her worried parents.
The fact that on her birthday, she hadn't contacted the family, and the family had not been able to contact her, that was a huge red flag.
One of the girls from the group, she messaged me and said, have I heard from Grace?
There are obviously people at the backpackers who realised she was missing, were concerned.
The biggest question on everyone's mind was, where was Grace? Feeling something was wrong, her father didn't hesitate. He bought a ticket to New Zealand and set off to find his daughter. Upon landing on December 5th, 2018, Grace's father's first move was to file a missing persons report with the local authorities. The New Zealand police were quick to respond and actively engaged with the case as soon as they heard about Grace's disappearance.
It was just after lunchtime. I'd walked down into the crime squad office, which is the floor below where my office is, and I was talking to the detective senior sergeant, and she actually said, "We've got a missing person complaint coming."
The police contacted the hostel where Grace was staying, and they confirmed that she hadn't returned on the night of December 1st, 2018. At first, the police didn't suspect foul play because most of her belongings were still in her hostel room. But feeling the urgency and pressure, the police quickly organized a press conference to ask for help in finding 22-year-old Grace Mullane, who hadn't been seen since 7:15 p.m. on December 1st.
Grace has been missing for 7 days. We last had contact with her on Saturday the 1st of December. Grace started this travel journey in Peru in South America, and at the end of this was really looking forward to the second leg in New Zealand.
Grace's family has launched a social media campaign urging people to report any sightings.
Over 20 staff members were assigned to the case. They understood the importance of using social media and reporting to gather information and aid in locating Grace and solving the case. The community's support and eyes on the lookout were seen as important in this effort.
I have worked on missing overseas tourist investigations previously. I knew just how much the international media would grip this up.
One of our reporters flagged up that a 21-year-old Essex girl had gone backpacking on her own in New Zealand and she'd gone missing in Auckland. We took a deep dive into exactly what had happened. Grace is one of our own, and we need to make sure that we do as much as we can to try and bring her home.
We actually did a video appeal to try and find her. The social media reaction has to be some of the biggest I can remember.
Luckily for detectives, it didn't take long to figure out who the last person Grace was seen with before her disappearance was. Their first move was to dig into her social media accounts to unravel the digital trail to piece together the events leading up to her vanishing. This digital detective work became a crucial step in the investigation.
People's social media accounts are always important in this day and age because a lot of the young people live on social media. So getting into her Facebook page, seeing what she'd been doing was crucial.
On the night Grace was last seen, she changed her Facebook profile picture and a comment was posted under it saying, "Beautiful, very radiant." This caught the attention of the police, and the person behind the comment was identified as Jesse Kempson, who was staying at the City Life Hotel in Auckland. What raised more concern was a post Jesse had written earlier. In parts of the post, he expressed apologies for his mistakes, arrogance, and selfishness. But first, let's learn more about Jesse. Jesse Kempson, 26 years old at the time, was born in Wellington and moved around a lot as a child after his parents separated. His grandparents played a role in raising him, but he became somewhat distant from many family members. People who knew Jesse described him as a pathological liar, someone who constantly told untruths about various aspects of his life. He had a habit of making up stories, like saying he was the cousin of a famous All Blacks rugby player or falsely claiming he was dying of cancer. His compulsive lying extended to everyone: employers, landlords, partners, and even his family and friends. Jesse's habit of constantly lying got him kicked out of many of his residences and caused him to lose jobs over and over again. He once told a former landlord that he was a pro softball player signed up by New Zealand's national softball team, the Black Sox, and claimed he was waiting for contract money. However, after 8 weeks of excuses, the landlord got suspicious. When she contacted the Black Sox management, Jesse's lies were exposed again. His last job in telephone sales also ended in dismissal due to his lying, and this happened on the same day he met Grace Mullane on December 1st, 2018. The police recognized him as the last person who was with Grace and realized he was the key to filling in the missing details in the investigation. So, on December 5th, 2018, the date Grace was reported missing, the police went to the City Life Hotel to talk to Jesse. Just as they reached the front desk, Jesse also returned to the hotel. Strangely, the moment he spotted the police, he swiftly turned around and started walking away, keeping his head firmly facing the opposite direction. However, the police quickly noticed Jesse's attempt to avoid them, chased after him, and brought him in for questioning. Despite Jesse's efforts to appear innocent, his denial over any involvement in Grace's disappearance, and sometimes even his concern, the police continued their investigation.
It's recording now. I've been in this room with you, I think, since the last 10 minutes. Yeah. Just written down the details. Yeah. You were spoken to by Detective Haynes and Detective Jordan. Yeah. That's in relation to a young lady, Grace Mullane. Yeah. All right. Yeah. And so there, you recognise her? Yeah. Okay. So it's Grace. She was 22 on the 2nd of December, just on her birthday. Yeah. Did you know that?
Yes, so we talked about that, yes.
Okay.
So I was talking to Grace on Tinder. Yeah. We'd matched on Friday. I saw that we'd matched the next day on Saturday. I saw a message from her saying, hey. So I messaged back saying, hey, how are you? How's your day going? I got a reply, great, yeah, in travelling around New Zealand, blah, 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 blah. She was staying at Party Backpackers, and she told me that she was going to be spending her birthday up there the next day.
During the interview, the police had an investigation team working hard, and one crucial phase was examining CCTV footage. Auckland City has a lot of CCTV cameras, which provided a vast amount of footage from the night Grace disappeared. Now, analyzing it took time because they had minute-by-minute footage covering every area. This helped them to see how Grace and Jesse were interacting, how they were moving around, and how the date was progressing.
I said, I know it's quick, but do you want to catch up for a drink? And she said, yep, cool. She asked me where. I said, Sky City. And then we met. I gave her a hug. She gave me a hug. And then we decided that we were going up to Andy's Burger Bar. She said, I'm from Essex. I said, is that near Geordie Shore? I had no idea where that was. And she said, no, it's just out of London. Oh, cool, yeah, sweet.
Whose idea was it to go to that particular burger place?
Me, because I didn't initially know that she was real.
What do you mean?
Well, there's a lot of, so have you heard of catfish? No. So catfishing is where someone uses your profile, uses your photos and pretends to be you and then meets, and you're a completely different person. Right. And it's happened to a few people I know in Australia. And it's all over the TV. So I thought, if I meet at Sky City, at least I know that there's lots of people around. So if it is someone that it's not, then
While being interviewed, Jesse brought up the idea of catfishing, expressing concern about meeting someone who might not be Grace. He claimed he chose to meet her at Sky City in a busy crowd to ensure his safety. This seemed like an attempt to show innocence, suggesting that if it wasn't Grace, he too could have been at risk of disappearing. The police found his reactions and behavior a bit strange during the interview, especially considering that the woman he was with had actually disappeared that night.
How does meeting in a public place sort of protect you from?
Well, there's security there. So if she wasn't who she said she was, at least in my mind, I'd feel safe. Yeah.
Okay. What did you tell her about yourself?
I just told her where my family are from. I told her what I did for work. And then that was it. Mm-hmm. I asked her if she's visiting Sydney, and she said she'd love to.
How did the evening pan out?
Yeah, pretty good.
How did the evening sort of come to an end?
There was a hug and a kiss on the cheek, and a thanks, nice meeting you.
So at this point, you guys are heading in the direction of Victoria Street.
Yeah, to the crossing.
Yeah, the crossing.
Yeah.
So you cross over, and then you've parted company at around about 8 p.m.
Yeah.
At one point, Grace had a choice to make. She could either go to the right and head back to her accommodation at the base backpackers, or go in the direction of the City Life Hotel where Jessie was staying.
And then you walk towards Queen Street.
Yeah. And she walks towards base. It was the intersection.
Yeah.
So I just crossed. That would have been the last place I saw her.
Okay. And you've parted company at around about 8 p.m. by your account.
Yeah.
Over the next moments, as the investigators increased the pressure on Jessie, he seemed to get a bit uneasy, showing signs of slight panic. However, he continued to maintain that he had nothing to hide, despite the growing intensity of the questioning.
It's entirely possible that she's been the victim of foul play. Okay, you understand what that means? Yeah. And what would your feelings be about providing us with a voluntary DNA sample in the event that we can compare that against something? Would you be happy with that?
100%. I mean, I know I haven't done anything wrong, so I'm happy to do it.
Okay. At this stage, we don't know what's happened to this girl.
Okay.
It's possible that somebody has killed her. Okay.
Okay.
Understand that?
Yeah.
She might, when I say foul play, I mean that someone might have murdered her. Don't know if she's been murdered or not yet. She may be alive and well.
Okay.
But she might also be dead. Okay. And it could be that you've done it.
Hey, I just want to ask a question. Am I being arrested for something I didn't do?
You've been arrested, mate.
Oh. Oh. Oh, sorry. Holy shit.
He said nothing out of the ordinary had happened that night. According to him, the date ended well with a hug and plans for the following day. They parted ways around 10 p.m., and he mentioned that he tried to message her on Tinder the next day, only to discover that Grace had unmatched him. This was where their interactions abruptly ended, as per Jessie's account. However, the officers were still in the process of reviewing CCTV footage from the City Life Hotel, and more answers to lingering questions were about to emerge. Despite Jessie's claim that they parted ways on the streets, the footage revealed something different. Both Jessie and Grace were seen arriving at the City Life Hotel arm in arm, looking happy. They even exited the elevator together on Jessie's floor. However, surprisingly, there was no footage of Grace leaving the building, which raised alarming questions about what might have happened after they entered the hotel. On the morning of Grace's birthday, cameras captured Jessie leaving the hotel, but there was no sign of Grace. The cameras kept a close eye on him in the hours that followed, tracking his every move. Jessie left the hotel and embarked on a curious series of activities. His first stop was shopping for a suitcase from a nearby store. Next, he made a detour to buy cleaning supplies. Then, before noon, he hopped into a taxi and headed to a car rental company where he decided to rent a flashy red Toyota Corolla. After several hours, Jessie met another woman he had connected with on Tinder. She later reported disturbing conversations that she had during their encounter. In a shocking turn of events, he talked about burying bodies, how to get rid of the smell of blood, and claimed to have friends who were police officers. His date felt extremely uneasy, so much so that she turned down Jessie's offer to ride in his car. Instead, she chose to make her own way home and decided never to talk to him again. Following the unsettling date, Jesse ventured into the city center again, but this time he had an unusual task, which was renting a Rug Doctor carpet cleaning machine. When the staff questioned him about why he needed it, Jesse calmly explained that he had some red wine stains that needed cleaning up soon. Despite the peculiar request, Jesse appeared calm and normal during this interaction. Later, around 9:30 in the evening, Jesse was spotted loading 2 suitcases onto a hotel trolley. He then unloaded them into the Toyota he'd rented earlier. After placing the bags in the trunk of the car, he went back to his room for the night. The next morning, around 7 a.m., Jesse appeared on camera once more. This time, he went to a nearby store and bought a shovel. After that, he got into the rented car and went for a drive. About 2 hours later, he was again seen at a local car wash, thoroughly cleaning the vehicle. It was a meticulous job before he returned back to his apartment. These actions, especially buying a shovel, raised further concerns and added to the mysterious series of events connected to Jesse. Finally, on December 5th, 2018, the day Jesse was questioned, he was observed visiting different places, including Albert Park, where he disposed of things in bins which were wrapped in black bags. Despite Jesse denying any involvement during the questioning, the police began to seriously suspect him.
That Thursday night, we arranged for a search warrant for his apartment at City Life Hotel. The forensic scientists were going to test Kempson's apartment for blood. And they used a chemical called luminol, which they spray. Luminol will react with blood and it will glow in the dark.
The forensic search of Jesse's room uncovered even more disturbing details. Despite Jesse's efforts to clean up, they found Grace's blood all over the floor. The luminol started glowing in almost the entire room, which exposed to what extent the attempt to clean up went. Not only that, but it also showed that while the blood was already wet, Jesse had walked through it many times. As time passed, people grew more fearful, and the police expressed serious concerns for Grace. On December 8th, 2018, with an increasing amount of evidence emerging, Jesse was finally taken into custody for further interviews. This time, when he was confronted with everything the officers had discovered, his story underwent a drastic change.
Tell me what happened last Saturday.
I remember leaving Bluestone. I don't know what time we left there exactly. The next thing I remember after that is being in the room with Grace. She started talking to me about 50 Shades of Grey, which is a sex fantasy movie. We started having, I guess, violent sex, and then she told me to hold her throat. And then at that point, we'd finished. All I remember is falling asleep in the shower.
In the further interview, Jesse claimed that when he woke up the next morning and realized Grace was dead, he went into shock. However, this raised many questions about how someone couldn't realize the well-being of their partner after an intimate moment, to the point where she could even die. Despite this, Jesse continued to deny any guilt in Grace's killing.
I woke up the next day. Initially, I thought Grace had left, and I saw that she was lying on the floor. I saw that she had blood coming from her nose. I screamed, I yelled out at her, and I tried to move her to see if she was awake. And that's when I panicked because I couldn't hear, and she was cold.
Jesse's first and second interviews presented a total contradiction. According to the interviewer, he appeared to be a narcissistic sociopath who was acting for his own pleasure. In Jesse's version, he claimed to be so scared that he had the presence of mind to plan and decide to pack Grace's body in a suitcase and bury it somewhere to hide all the evidence. However, he seemed to have overlooked the fact that CCTV cameras captured all of his movements and revealed the inconsistencies in his stories.
Did you consider seeking help from St. John's?
I dialed 111, but I didn't hit the button because I was scared how bad it looked.
You said you didn't know what to do. Why did you purchase a suitcase?
Because I was freaking out. I went to the warehouse at the atrium and bought a suitcase. I remember putting Grace in the suitcase. I was just in shock the whole time. I put Grace in the back of a hire car. I drove the hire car into Wilson's car park. I sat there for a little while, praying. I picked up a shovel. I ended up driving towards the Waitakaries. I went into the bush. I dug a hole.
We're going to get out of here very, very soon, and you're going to take us to where you buried him.
Yeah. To your knowledge, did Grace die while she was in your company?
To my knowledge, I would say yes.
And at any time and at any stage, did you intend to cause her death?
No.
Did you kill Grace Vine? Jesse Kempson, you're under arrest for the murder of Grace Vine on or about the 2nd of December. You understand?
Yeah.
Jesse was then officially charged and held in police custody. While behind bars, the investigation continued, and it revealed more disturbing details. Between December 1st and December 7th, it was discovered that Jesse made a series of unsettling Google searches. This included the night of December 1st around 1:30 a.m., while Grace lay dead in his room. Jesse looked up topics like hottest fire, flesh-eating birds, and the Waitakere Ranges, the location where he buried Grace's body. Following these searches, he visited an adult site and took several intimate photos of Grace's lifeless body. These actions, not indicative of shock, suggested that he was aware of his actions and intentionally did it. Meanwhile, based on the information Jesse provided during the interview, the police quickly initiated a search on December 9, 2018, in an area on Scenic Drive near the Waitakere Reservoir. Shortly after 4 p.m., officers discovered a body about 10 yards from the road. The swift action by law enforcement led to the tragic confirmation that it was none other than Grace's body, marking a somber conclusion to the investigation.
We located the body, which we believe to be Grace. The formal identification process will now take place. However, based on the evidence we have gathered over the past few days, we expect that this is Grace.
And what we know is that Kempson strangled Grace for 7 to 10 minutes. That's not rough sex. That's murder.
Grace's parents had clung to hope that their daughter might be safe somewhere and would come back home, but this news completely shattered their world. The moment was painfully emotional for everyone involved in the search. Grief spread across the nation, and thousands of people paid tribute to Grace by participating in vigils. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern publicly apologized to Grace's parents and extended her full support during this heart-wrenching time. The collective mourning reflected the impact of Grace's tragic fate on the entire community.
Firstly, I cannot imagine the grief of her family and what they will be experiencing and feeling right now. And so, on behalf of New Zealand, I want to apologise to Grace's family. Your daughter should have been safe here, and she wasn't, and I'm sorry for that.
Jesse Kempson faced murder charges for Grace Mullane, and on December 10th, 2018, just 9 days after Grace's death, he appeared in an Auckland court. To guarantee a fair trial, he was given interim name suppression. This legal measure aimed to avoid prejudicing the trial proceedings by limiting the release of certain details to the public during this early stage. Following an autopsy, a pathologist confirmed that Grace had been strangled. The examination revealed bruises on her arms and chest, which indicated that she'd been pinned down. The pathologist explained that causing these injuries required considerable force, and the pressure on her neck must have endured for 4 to 5 minutes, long enough to lead to Grace's tragic death.
And in this case, there was an area of significant bruising, and it was on the left side of the neck, and it basically extended from the jaw down. There has been sufficient pressure in that place for a sufficient period of time and for sufficient force for that bruising to occur.
More than a month after her death, on January 10, 2019, hundreds of people gathered for her funeral at Brentwood Cathedral in Essex. Detective Scott Beard, who had been involved in the case, flew to England to pay his respects and offer support to the Mullane family. The turnout reflected the widespread sympathy and shared grief felt by the whole community during this somber occasion. On January 16, 2019, just 6 days after Grace was laid to rest, Jessie appeared in the High Court and entered a plea of not guilty. The trial started on November 4, 2019, lasting for 3 weeks. Throughout most of it, Jessie maintained a stone-faced demeanor and displayed no emotions. Jessie's defense team, led by Ian Brookie, argued that Grace's death was a result of consensual rough intimacy that had gone terribly wrong. They claimed that Grace had been involved in similar physical encounters before meeting Jessie, and this instance was a tragic case of physical misadventure. The defense sought to frame the events leading to Grace's death within the context of consensual actions that took an unintended and unfortunate turn rather than a deliberate act. They asserted that Jessie, in a state of panic, tried to hide Grace's body after realizing that the encounter had accidentally led to her death. They portrayed his subsequent attempts to conceal Grace's body as impulsive responses to a situation that had spiraled out of control.
Defense cases that this is not a murder. And that's still what I say to you now, nothing has changed. It was an accidental death that took place in the context of sexual activities that, if done incorrectly by inexperienced and or intoxicated people, can go wrong.
It doesn't matter whether she was having sex or not, or it doesn't even come into it. The only thing that's important is that he went into that room, she went into that room, and only one person came out of there.
As the defense aimed to depict Grace's murder as accidental, prosecutor Crown Solicitor Brian Dickey presented a substantial amount of strong evidence and witnesses. Dickey countered the notion that Jessie panicked, emphasizing that this wasn't a mere mistake. According to him, the evidence pointed to a deliberate and intentional act. Jessie systematically and coldly attempted to cover his tracks by consistently lying and fabricating numerous stories in the process.
In this case, to have killed Grace Mullane, the defendant, gentleman over here at the back, behind me, had to have had her under his grip, suffocating her, if that's the right term, strangling her is probably the correct term, for a total of 5 to 10 minutes, at some point of which she lost consciousness and would have become under his hand hold, unconscious and limp and lifeless, and he had to carry on. And if that's not reckless murder in this country, ladies and gentlemen, somebody will have to explain to me what is.
On November 22, 2019, after only 5 hours of deliberation, a jury comprising 7 women and 5 men returned a guilty verdict, rejecting Jesse Kempson's claims of innocence. He was found guilty of the murder of Grace Mullane and received a life sentence in prison on February 21, 2020, with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. This meant he'd be eligible for parole after serving at least 17 years behind bars.
Miss Mullane's lifeless body was with you in that room when you searched for and accessed 4 pornographic sites. These were not the actions of a man in panic, far from it. Your actions reveal a complete disregard for your victim. This jury, having found you guilty of the murder of Grace Emmy Rose Mullane, you are convicted.
The verdict of murder today would be welcomed by every member of the Mullane family and friends of Grace. It will not reduce the pain, the suffering that we've had to endure for over the past year.
I heard it on the radio, and I literally just like burst out and crying like it just hit me like a truck.
I called my mum before anything else. I was just screaming down the phone. I was shaking. I remember it was just, it was a horrible feeling.
The biggest emotion is anger. Like, how dare he put his hands on it? You feel a bit guilty. Maybe we could have done more. She should have been safe.
The case sparked widespread anger as many criticized and expressed frustration about how Grace's life was portrayed during the trial and how her death was rationalized by her killer. Many saw it as shameful victim blaming rather than holding the killer accountable. However, the story didn't conclude there, as Jessie faced 2 more trials the following year. In October 2020, 2 women came forward with harrowing stories after seeing Jessie's blurred image following his arrest for Grace's murder. The first trial involved an ex-partner of Jessie who spoke about enduring physical, emotional, and financial abuse. Jessie used to hold knives to her throat, choked her, coerced her into consensual acts, and drained her account of $10,000. For this, he was found guilty of 8 charges and sentenced to 7.5 years in prison. In November 2020, Jessie faced another trial for physically abusing a young tourist he met on Tinder just 8 months before meeting Grace. He tried to force himself on her and threatened to harm her and her family if she didn't comply. For this, he was found guilty and received an additional 3 and 5 years in prison, bringing the total to 11 years, which would be running concurrently with the sentence for Grace's murder. Unfortunately, in November 2020, Grace's father, David Mullane, passed away after battling cancer. Grace's parents never had the opportunity to see their daughter again. She was a lively and adventurous girl, always eager to explore new things. Unfortunately, she set out on a journey from which she never returned home, leaving her spirit high, but her presence sorely missed.
Out of this tragedy, the Mullane family have started the Love Grace campaign. That's getting handbags and then filling them with items for the victims of domestic violence. And when I speak to Gillian, she tells me that there's handing out over 10,000 handbags. Now, she describes that to me as 10,000 smiles. That is so touching. One of the things that comes out of this is that a woman should be able to do what they want without having a sexual predator do what he wants and taking her life. You full hope that another person doesn't suffer the same fate or family go through the same ordeal.
On the night of September 28, 2017, 27-year-old Nikki Adamando had something heavy on her heart. Just moments before, she took a drastic step to protect herself and her children. Nikki revealed that she'd shot her boyfriend, Chris Grover, who had been consistently abusing and threatening her.
You found it before it was effective. You have no idea what came like that. So how many shots were fired? One. I reached into the couch and I kneed him and it fell back. He said, I will kill you and people have no life.
The news stunned everyone who knew them because no one expected such a shocking outcome.
I never in a million years had a fear that he would die. I was afraid she would die every day.
Nikki had been silently enduring years of abuse from Chris. Whether it was her friends, therapist, or colleagues at work, everyone could see the bruises and burn marks on her body. However, she hesitated to report it to the police because she always feared losing her kids. Now, this woman, unmistakably a victim of domestic violence, finds herself in a twisted struggle to convince the investigators that she took Chris's life in self-defense.
Obviously self-defense, right?
I can't make that determination right now. After the interview, Nikki's arrest sparked numerous people hitting the streets to support her. On the flip side, loyal supporters of Chris insisted he was a gentle, loving person who could never harm anyone. Amidst the chaos, the lingering question emerges: was Nikki truly a victim of domestic violence, or a manipulative liar? Poughkeepsie, New York is a city known for its historical charm and location along the Hudson River. However, it has gained notoriety due to the high-profile murder cases that have occurred here, including the 2017 incident involving Nicole Adamando. Despite these tragic events, Poughkeepsie remains a diverse community with various cultural and recreational offerings. But what happened with Nikki Adamando that made the whole Poughkeepsie community come out of their houses to support her? Well, let's find out. Late one September night on September 28, 2017, Officer Richard Sicily patrolled the quiet streets of Poughkeepsie, New York. It was around 2 a.m. when he found himself behind a car halted at a red light. When the light switched to green, the car ahead remained stationary. Suspecting a drowsy or inattentive driver, Officer Sicily gave a polite honk. Little did he know, this seemingly routine moment was about to take an unexpected turn. Seeing the car unmoving, Officer Sicily stepped out of his cruiser and went towards it. At that moment, a petite woman, just 5 feet tall and no more than 100 pounds, emerged from the driver's seat. She was barefoot and appeared highly distressed. In the backseat, 2 children were peacefully asleep. The officer considered possibilities. Perhaps the woman was lost or there was a medical issue, but he was completely unprepared for what this distressed woman was about to reveal.
Breathing black, okay. Just take a few deep breaths. Breathing black, okay. Just take a few deep breaths.
The agitated woman in stocking feet was 28-year-old Nikki Adamando, who quickly informed the officer that something had gone terribly wrong at her home.
He's lying on the couch. He's just lying there. He said, "You can leave. I'll kill you."
What's his name? Chris Grover. Chris Grover? Like we're looking at Chris Grover. Chris Grover.
Nikki explained that she'd been enduring abuse for a long time by her boyfriend, which reached a breaking point on September 28, 2017. When she tried to leave, her boyfriend, armed with a gun, pointed it at her and made threatening gestures.
So I picked it up and he said, "What to it?" And
Police Officer Sicily, I think, is in shock that this is unfolding before him. Now, if there's an ambulance that's necessary, there are 2 children in the car.
After talking to the officer, Nikki urgently called her friend for help. Without delay, Elizabeth Clifton responded to Nikki's distressing call. When she arrived, the officers requested her to wait in a nearby parking lot. They held off on Nikki and Elizabeth meeting right away because there were still some details they needed to find out. But who was Nikki Adamando? Nicole Adamando, who goes by Nikki, was born on November 19, 1988. When she was just 4 years old, she moved to Poughkeepsie, New York with her family. Growing up, she was known as an energetic, carefree, and outgoing little girl. In 2008, when Nikki was just 19 years old, she started working at a local gym called Mr. Todd's Gymnastics. There she worked as a children's gymnastics coach. It was there that she met Christopher Grover, a fellow coach and co-worker who was 21 years old. In a short time, they became more than just co-workers. Chris became Nikki's life partner. Sadly, Nikki claimed to have shot Chris that night because he'd been continuously abusing and threatening her. The officer went to Nikki's apartment and discovered Chris, her partner, apparently asleep on the couch, but he was already dead from a single gunshot to the head. When they searched the entire apartment, they found the shower running in the bathroom and a broken laptop in the bathtub. Meanwhile, Elizabeth had also heard about Chris's death, and it was incredibly shocking for her because she'd never anticipated such a tragic outcome.
Had a fear that he would die. I was afraid she would die every day.
Everything seemed confusing, and the only person who could answer all the questions was Nikki herself. So they brought Nikki to the station for questioning, as they wanted to know why she'd killed Chris. Was it truly due to domestic violence, or was there something else going on? In the meantime, Gail Grover, Chris's mother, received the heart-wrenching news from the sheriff that her son had passed away. Gail's immediate concern was for Nikki and the kids. When she asked the sheriff, her main question was, are Nikki and the kids okay? Gail expressed that she had no idea what had truly gone wrong with Chris. She described Chris as a kind and athletic person. He was super energetic, outgoing, and very charming. Chris had a black belt in Taekwondo and served as the head gymnastics coach at Mr. Todd's gym in Poughkeepsie. His students at the gym loved him because he made gymnastics fun with his energetic coaching style. When he first met Nikki in 2008, their close work led to a deep friendship. Over time, their connection turned romantic, and they officially started dating. By 2012, they decided to live together, and Nikki shared that Chris was a remarkably supportive, compassionate, and understanding partner. He assured her he'd wait until she was ready, and after about a year, they happily announced Nikki's pregnancy. Their first child, named Ben, arrived in 2013, and things were going well. Chris proved to be a fantastic father who was deeply in love with Nikki and their child. It wasn't long before 2 years later, Nikki became a mother again in 2015, welcoming their daughter Fane into the family.
Was he excited about being a dad?
Absolutely. Ecstatic. He was a proud papa.
Everyone saw Nikki as an excellent mother because her love for her children was the most important thing to her.
Nikki is the most gentle, loving friend we've ever had. Everything she does is for her kids.
Nikki and Chris's story, like any other, wasn't perfect, but what caught Elizabeth's attention first were some strange changes in Nikki. She noticed that Nikki seemed even more anxious than usual. Despite being a really gentle and soft-spoken person, she became more skittish. She wasn't sleeping well, she was eating less, and just didn't seem to be doing well overall. Elizabeth thought these changes were because Nikki was now simultaneously studying early childhood education, working at a preschool, taking care of her kids, and still keeping up with her job at the gym, causing a lot of stress.
She came to class with what looked to me like a black eye. She covered herself completely.
Mm-hmm.
And even in the summer, she'd be wearing long sleeves, long pants, have a scarf covering around her neck.
Not just Elizabeth, but Nikki's childhood friends, Laura McAdanu and Rachel Hawkes, also noticed something odd about Nikki. It wasn't just her behavior, but she had injuries all over her body. There were bruises on many parts that were clearly visible.
There were so many instances where I would notice a bruise, would often say, oh, I was playing with Ben and I got hit by his guitar. It was always something that to me at the time seemed very
plausible.
I didn't think twice about it.
On September 28, 2017, Child Protection Services, or CPS, visited Chris's apartment after an anonymous parent from the gym, where Chris still worked, reported her concerns. The parent had seen Chris losing his temper with students and noticed Nikki covered in marks and worried about her and the kids at home. But later that night, Chris was found dead in his apartment, and in the interrogation room, Nikki was trying hard to explain why she'd killed Chris.
He faced me and then he looked up for a second and I was like, obviously self-defense, right?
Nikki genuinely believed the detectives would see that she acted in self-defense rather than intentionally killing Chris. She thought her actions, along with evidence showing her innocence, would make it clear it was self-defense. However, the twist came when Nikki was arrested for killing Chris. Despite everyone close to her and her supporters, who believed that Nikki, the victim of domestic violence, was held responsible for choosing to defend herself, being heartbroken by the news, a lingering question remained. Why was Nikki arrested when it seemed like she was the victim? Somehow, Elizabeth had the answer to this, and it all began in April 2016 when Elizabeth expressed her concerns about Nikki's injuries. She was genuinely scared for Nikki, always worried about her safety at home with Chris. In response, Nikki admitted to Elizabeth that Chris was abusing her every day, but she wasn't alone in uncovering the truth. Journalist Rachel Snyder, who dedicated 10 years to studying domestic violence, stumbled upon Nikki's case. After reading many articles and talking to numerous people, Snyder also believed that Chris was physically trying to force himself on Nikki. In the beginning, even though Chris was sometimes violent, things weren't too bad. During Nikki's pregnancy in 2013, he was gentle, sweet, and caring. Nikki felt hopeful, thinking the baby might improve their relationship. The excitement of becoming parents made their relationship less rocky. However, after their son Ben was born, things took a turn for the worse. Nikki decided to leave her job at the preschool and focus on starting her own photography business, along with selling homemade booties for infants. While Chris was initially a great father and helpful with Ben, about 6 weeks later, he began pressuring Nikki for intimacy, which caused a strain in their relationship.
And he slammed her head into the doorframe of Ben's room and then her.
A few days later, Nikki's face and jaw were so swollen that she couldn't even chew, and she went to Vassar Brothers Hospital in Poughkeepsie for medical help. Her condition was so bad that they decided to call a domestic assistance program and convince Nikki to take action. The examiner noted in the records that Nikki's injuries were so severe that she had to speak very softly, and it was hard to hear what she was saying. Nikki chose not to file a police report because she was afraid Chris would take Ben away from her. Unfortunately, the troubles didn't end there. 2 years later, in 2015, after their daughter Fane was born, a similar incident occurred. A few weeks later at home, Nikki was cooking eggs for Ben when Chris demanded she make enough for him too. In a sarcastic tone, Nikki replied, "Yes, sir," which made Chris extremely angry. He grabbed a metal spoon and heated it on the gas stove flame. Then he held Nikki's other arm and burned her in several places with the hot spoon. Nikki, in excruciating pain, was only able to plead for him to stop. She sought medical treatment again, and this time the examiner took pictures of Nikki's injuries. The images captured bite marks on her shoulder and back, along with burns covering her body.
He was, as far as I understand, tying her up. I remember seeing the marks around her neck and wrists. What he was doing was whipping her.
Chris's addiction to violent adult internet content took a dark turn for Nikki as he wanted to reenact things he saw in those videos and even created elaborate setups for aggressive acts against her. Tying her up, attacking her, and at one point using a weapon to choke her until she passed out, he went to extreme lengths. Shockingly, he recorded all of this without Nikki's consent. Despite the horrific abuse, Nikki hesitated to report it to the police. She feared that if she identified herself as a victim, Child Protective Services might take her kids away. This fear haunted Nikki, and she was determined not to lose her kids at any cost. Nikki's friend Elizabeth and many others urged her to press charges against Chris, but fear emotionally paralyzed her. In 2016, Elizabeth went the extra mile to help Nikki leave her house. Nikki even packed her kids into the car and drove to Elizabeth's house, but she couldn't bring herself to stop. Nikki circled in front of the house, slowing down and then speeding up again. For hours, Elizabeth watched as Nikki drove past repeatedly. When Elizabeth called out for her to stop and come inside, Nikki tearfully admitted she couldn't do it. The fear of Chris's reaction held her captive, and she couldn't bring herself to stop the car because she believed Chris would never forgive her.
And that's what a domestic violence victim leaving looks like. It looks like a series of false starts. In this mindset, her terror of him is stronger than her belief that the system will save her.
Throughout 2017, Nikki sought medical help multiple times for various violent incidents. First, it was rope-like burns around her neck and using it on her body. She was often bruised and bleeding. Then Nikki reported Chris having a gun and using it to try to be physical with her. Then finally came September 28, 2017, with the anonymous visit from Child Protective Services, and all eyes were on them. The worker wrote on a piece of paper, "Are you safe right now?" and discreetly showed it to Nikki, who nodded yes. The worker then asked if there were any weapons in the house, but Nikki lied, saying there weren't any, even though Chris owned a gun. When the worker questioned her about the bruises that Nikki had, both Chris and Nikki claimed they were just having normal fights and arguments like any other couple. So the worker didn't find any reason to take emergency action and left from there. Meanwhile, Chris had also left the house, but returned back in the evening. According to Nikki, he seemed calm and even kind. Surprisingly, they were intimate after the kids went to sleep, and this time Chris was much gentler than Nikki had grown accustomed to. After leaving the room at one point, Chris called Nikki again, and this time he was holding his gun. He asked her to look at it and began showing how it worked, loading it while she was just nervously watching him doing that. In a chilling moment, he casually mentioned, "You know, I could kill you in your sleep, making Nikki feel extremely unsafe." She tried to relax by taking a shower. However, while she was in the shower, Chris unexpectedly entered the bathroom, saying he could shoot her in there, but it would be too loud. Shockingly, he then threw the laptop into the tub, and after Nikki got out of the shower, Chris forced himself onto her, creating a distressing and uncomfortable situation. As soon as she walked into the living room, Chris instructed Nikki to lie down on top of him on the couch. Nikki, feeling fearful, complied for a while, but when she sensed that Chris had finally fallen asleep, she cautiously tried to sneak away. However, her attempt took a frightening turn when Chris suddenly woke up and pulled the gun from the couch cushion. In a bid to protect herself, Nikki swatted away Chris's arm, and as a result, Chris dropped the gun on the floor, which gave Nikki the chance to swiftly grab it and point it at him. Strangely, Chris nonchalantly reclined on the couch, seemingly unconcerned. This lack of worry might have stemmed from the damage he'd already done to Nikki's self-esteem and confidence. Chris then taunted Nikki, saying she would never shoot him, and threatened a grim outcome, saying, "You're going to give me the gun, and I'm going to kill you, then take my own life, and your kids will have nobody." He barely finished his sentence when Nikki, without any hesitation, lunged at him with the gun and pulled the trigger. At that moment, Nikki said it was a matter of kill or be killed. The night took a shocking and unexpected twist when Nikki, instead of being seen as a victim, found herself arrested for the death of Chris Grover. In March 2019, Nikki Adamando, who was out on bail, faced trial for the murder of her partner, Chris. The Poughkeepsie court became a gathering place for friends and advocates who were all wearing purple, the color symbolizing victims of domestic violence, showing their support. On one side stood loyal supporters of Chris who were convinced that he was a calm and gentle person who could never harm anyone. They were shocked to hear that Nikki's defense relied on claims of his alleged abuse and violence towards her. Chris's mother, Gail, steadfastly rejected these allegations and maintained her belief in her son's innocence throughout the trial.
Chris didn't do this. My son never hurt anybody. And that's the bottom line.
The courtroom became a battleground of conflicting perspectives on a tragic and twisted case of violence. Inside the Dutchess County Courthouse in Poughkeepsie, prosecutors contended that Nikki portrayed herself as a victim, asserting that all her claims about domestic violence from Chris were false. Prosecutor Hannah Krause, who had dedicated much of her career to advocating for victims of physical abuse, remained skeptical of Nikki's narrative. To her, Nikki didn't fit the typical profile of an abuse victim. During the trial, Prosecutor Krause highlighted the first piece of physical evidence, the gun Nikki used to kill Chris. She emphasized that Chris sustained a direct contact wound to the head. Also, the medical examiner's testimony added weight to this, stating that the gun muzzle imprint on Chris's head indicated it was embedded when Nikki pulled the trigger. So, if Chris had been awake, Nikki wouldn't have been able to shoot at such close range. This suggested that Chris was likely asleep at the moment of the incident, casting doubt on Nikki's narrative of trying to save herself. Krause also argued that it was actually Nikki, not Chris, who threw the laptop in the tub, suggesting maybe Nikki wanted to make it appear as if Chris was trying to hide the evidence of violence which was recorded on it. However, Nikki might not have anticipated that the laptop could be recovered in such a way that its contents could be examined, revealing there was absolutely no evidence of abuse. To support her claim, Krause presented a series of texts Nikki sent to Chris days before his death, where she called him a man-child and questioned his intelligence. According to Krause, these texts suggested that Nikki was the one who was abusing Chris. Adding a twist to the case, Krause also presented damning evidence, which was multiple internet searches on Chris's phone on the night he died, and she believed that Nikki was behind these searches.
15 minutes of searches that are a roadmap to exactly how he was murdered.
In a text sent 6 weeks before the incident, Nikki expressed her frustration, saying, "I haven't figured out a way to kill him without being caught, so I'm still here." This led the prosecutor, Krause, to discuss a dark chapter in Nikki's life, which actually completely changed her. She acknowledged that Nikki had suffered a traumatic experience when she was just 5 years old during her first sleepover at her friend Caitlin's house. Caitlin lived with her mother and her mother's boyfriend, whom she referred to as Uncle Butch. In the middle of the night, Nikki, who was sleeping with Caitlin, was suddenly awakened by Butch, who was attempting to force himself on her. Unfortunately, Caitlin, also a victim of Butch, couldn't help Nikki in that distressing moment. When Nikki shared this incident with her mother Belinda, it was met with denial and a request to forget about it. However, this incident had a profound impact on Nikki, transforming her into an extremely shy and quiet person. It altered her ability to trust people and influenced how she formed relationships. When Nikki met Chris, she was still haunted by past experiences, which made intimacy uncomfortable for her. Despite this, Chris, seeming to be a caring partner, respected her feelings and agreed to wait until she felt ready. His love and care for Nikki remained unwavering throughout. Now, if Chris was always kind to Nikki, then how did the stories of abuse start? Krause claimed that Nikki invented these stories of abuse by Chris. She pointed out that Nikki never reported these allegations to the police, but only shared them with friends and therapists. A few years into her relationship with Chris, Nikki shared with a therapist that when she lived in an apartment complex with her mother would invite maintenance workers over for shots of alcohol. On a day when Nikki was home alone, a maintenance worker came by for repairs and attempted to force himself on her. However, Nikki later admitted that her memories of the attacker were unclear, and she wasn't sure if it was from the maintenance worker or if she'd mixed it up with memories involving Chris.
How do you not remember which abuse was by the maintenance worker and which abuse was by your partner?
Around the same time, Nikki met a married police officer who was the father of one of her gymnastics students. He offered Nikki the opportunity to move in with him, his wife, and children to work as a babysitter. Initially, she viewed the 45-year-old man as a protector and even a father figure. However, as Nikki lived with the family longer, she became increasingly uncomfortable. There was even a point when he attempted to abuse and force himself on Nikki. It's challenging to comprehend the circumstances under which their relationship began, especially considering she was still living with Chris and was pregnant with Ben. Now, when discussing the marks and bruises on Nikki's body, Krause argued that her injuries often had innocent explanations. Not all bruises were the result of violence. Many were actually self-inflicted. Krause pointed out that even all the medical records weren't straightforward. In Nikki's first visit to Vassar Brothers Hospital, she was asked a series of questions regarding the abuse, the injuries inflicted on her, and the burn marks all over her body. At that time, Nikki consistently answered no, denying that anyone had harmed her. However, after Fane was born, she returned to the hospital and this time answered yes to every single one of those questions. Krause suggested that Nikki was trying to blame Chris for all the abuse that she went through, making him the main culprit behind it. After the Child Protective Service's visit that night, Nikki feared that her made-up abuse stories would be exposed and she might lose her kids, which was her greatest fear.
She was not the victim in this case. Chris was the victim in this case. And that became very, very apparent. I think people need to understand what really happened here.
And what really happened here?
Chris Grover was asleep when she killed him. That's what happened here.
As the defense case unfolded, attorneys John and Ben Oster argued that Nikki lived in constant danger with Chris. They asserted that if she hadn't fought back and killed him that night, it would have been her life in jeopardy instead of Chris's. During the trial, Nikki's lawyers had the task of persuading the jury that on the night of September 28, 2017, she acted in self-defense. Their argument centered around the idea that Nikki shot Chris to save her own life and the lives of her children. To support their claims, Nikki's lawyers brought in witnesses, including psychologists, examiners, midwives, and friends, to testify about the extensive abuse she suffered at the hands of Chris over the years. These individuals, having witnessed Nikki's plight, were genuinely concerned for her safety. They consistently advised her to leave Chris and report the violence to law enforcement. Despite their advice, Nikki, scared of Chris, never felt courageous enough to take such steps. Next, they also presented photos of injuries and bruises in court, emphasizing that these marks couldn't be self-inflicted by Nikki. They pointed to specific injuries like bite marks on her neck, rope marks on her neck and hands, and bruises from physical violence all over her body. The lingering question persisted. If neither Chris nor Nikki caused these bruises, then who was responsible?
It's on her neck, on her back, places that she couldn't reach. How do you know if any of those injuries actually came from Chris and not one of the other individuals that she was claiming she was involved in a relationship with?
But Nikki's lawyers weren't buying it. They argued that the other men the prosecution brought up were just a ploy to create confusion and an attempt to shame Nikki by suggesting she was involved with multiple men. According to them, the truth was clear. She had no physical relationship with anyone other than Chris. They believed that it wasn't crucial to focus on whether Chris was victimizing her with intimate partner violence. Instead, they stressed the importance of determining if killing Chris was the right decision or not. They contended that the aggressive texts Nikki sent were typical responses when someone's uncomfortable, challenging the prosecution's narrative. They also pointed out to the jurors that all the internet searches on how to kill someone while sleeping were on Chris's phone. There was no proof that Nikki did those searches. Some believe that Chris might be the one who did them, but there was no evidence supporting that idea. The lawyers argued that the medical examiner, Dr. Newman, also testified that there was no proof Chris was actually sleeping. He suggested it could have happened the way Nikki described. Now, to get to the exact truth, they called Nikki herself to the stand so jurors could hear directly from her about what really happened with her. Nikki, who was visibly shaken and in tears, told the court that Chris used to lash out whenever he felt disrespected. She shared that he never cared for her and reiterated her story of abuse, including instances where he beat her, assaulted her, choked her, and left her tied up for hours. She told the jurors that after Fane was born, Chris began watching adult violent content videos constantly and also tried to recreate them with her. Nikki's attorneys also presented photos which were mostly too graphic, but the videos that were recorded were always off camera, and in those videos, only Nikki can be seen tied up, with Chris, who was always absent. These videos were uploaded on an adult website featuring violent content and disrespectful language. When it was searched, it was determined that all those videos were uploaded by the username Grover Respect. Strangely, when the jurors saw these photos, they didn't really notice the ugly words or information on the post. Grover Respect described himself as a 29-year-old cinematographer who loved martial arts, much like Chris. However, the judge ruled that there was no way to prove that Chris created Grover Respect and posted these videos on that website. But it didn't end there. In a surprising twist, there was additional evidence in the case that the jurors didn't get to see. This included Nikki's full medical report from 2014, where she talked about the violence she experienced. Also, there were midwife exams noting injuries the summer before Chris passed away, which were kept from public view. It's not uncommon for some evidence to be excluded at a murder trial, but many contended that excluding this evidence was a mistake. Prosecutor Krause argued that Nikki could be the one who made those explicit videos herself, as there was no way to identify a man in the photos. Krause believed that bit by bit, Nikki had been creating evidence against Chris, which is why Chris wasn't in any of the evidence. Nikki's nervousness during the trial was also noted by her prosecutors and Chris's mother.
She would say one thing and then in the next breath she was saying something else. Right on the stand, you could see that it wasn't the truth.
After extensive arguments and testimonies in Nikki's case, the opinions remained divided, with some believing Nikki was innocent and others thinking Chris was innocent. Following 14 days of testimony, the case went to the jurors, who had the challenging task of deciding whether Nikki Adimando was a terrified victim or a manipulative liar. After 3 days of deliberation, a verdict was announced. In April 2019, the jury, consisting of 8 women and 4 men, rejected Nikki's claim of self-defense and convicted her of criminal possession of a weapon and second-degree murder. As a result, she was sentenced to 19 years to life in prison. The jury's decision to convict Nikki, despite her traumatic experiences and potential harm, shocked many people. Some believed it resembled a real-life Gone Girl scenario, suggesting Nikki planned everything for years, even inflicting injuries on herself to later justify killing Chris. On the other hand, Chris's family and friends felt a sense of relief, finally hearing that the jury believed Chris was innocent and wasn't responsible for abusing Nikki in any way.
And for once, a little bit of relief, because they had drugged Christopher's name through the mud so bad and turned him into this monster that he was not.
Did you feel vindicated? No, this is never about me. I felt happy for Chris's family. They got to the point where they heard the jury say guilty.
Now, if you think the case was finished and that's the end, then hold on, because the case isn't over just yet. Due to an updated New York state law in 2019 called the Domestic Violence Survivors Justice Act, Nikki was entitled to another day in court. A hearing was held in 2020 where her claims of domestic violence played a role in reducing her sentence. This law allowed the judge to consider the defendant's status as a victim and how it contributed to the crime they committed when determining the sentencing. Judge Edward McLaughlin, who was also overseeing Nikki's trial, heard arguments from prosecutors claiming Nikki wasn't a genuine victim. They contended that she had all the access to services and could have left Chris at any time, even on the day he died. However, supporters of Nikki argued that labeling her as not a real victim oversimplified the complex dynamics of domestic violence. Krauss argued that Nikki had a car and the means to leave, emphasizing that she could have done so on the day Chris died. Nikki's defense stressed that leaving was not a straightforward option, as Nikki might have faced severe consequences even if she had left Chris, challenging the common misconception about escaping abusive relationships. Nikki even sought help and support services, but with 2 young children at home, finding a safe way out proved challenging for her. Even on the night Chris died, Nikki revealed to the police that she pleaded with him at least 17 times to let her go and promised not to tell anyone, but Chris refused to allow her to leave. Nikki's defense argued that leaving an abusive and violent partner wouldn't necessarily guarantee her safety. They emphasized that even if Nikki had left Chris, the risk of harm could persist, making leaving not a guaranteed option for her safety. The defense suggested that escaping a situation of ongoing abuse posed its own set of dangers and challenges for Nikki. In February 2020, the judge leaned towards the prosecution's argument, stating that Nikki was very close to her front door the night Chris died and could have left. The judge also mentioned that Nikki's inconsistent statements about past abuse made it difficult to determine the identity of her abuser. Despite this, many of Nikki's supporters maintain that she was the true victim, emphasizing that all the documented instances of abuse point to Chris as the perpetrator.
To porn sites. And so that was a part of the testimony that was not entered into court. And so the jury wasn't allowed to see. I mean, when people interviewed jurors afterwards, they said, why didn't you believe Nikki's version of the domestic violence? They said they didn't understand, why didn't she leave?
Nikki's supporters gathered outside the Poughkeepsie courthouse, and this time, though the court didn't overturn her conviction, they did rule in her favor. They decided she deserved a reduced sentence under the Survivors Justice Act, changing it from 19 years to life to 7.5 years in prison. With 5 years already served, Nikki's release was scheduled for 2024, and she was released on January 4th, 2024, now 35 years old. As Nikki served her time behind bars, her children found a home with relatives, and the Grover family faithfully visited them every other day. The only 2 people who know about the mystery of what transpired on that fateful night of September 28th, 2017 are Nikki and Chris, and sadly, only one of them is alive to tell their side of the story.
I was afraid that if I moved forward, nothing would happen, or very little, and then it would be more dangerous when he came back. I stayed as long as I did, trying to keep us all together until I couldn't anymore.
Domestic violence can happen to anyone, but speaking up about it is challenging. What do you think? Was Nikki truly a victim in this case? Or was she a manipulative liar, even though she seemingly had everything in life?
I'm Nicole Robo, and I've been nominated
for the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge.
The girl you see is 13-year-old Nicole Lovell. On January 27th, 2016, the world of her mother Tammy turned upside down when she opened the door to her daughter's room.
Nothing's ever happened like this before, ever.
This case examines the twists and turns in the disappearance of young Nicole from Blacksburg, Virginia. A frantic search began against the ticking clock because Nicole couldn't survive more than a day without her crucial medication. But what shocked everyone was that Nicole herself made the chilling choice to escape into the unknown that night. And while searching for her, some frightening details came to light that turned the case into a whole new direction.
I get there, and then I see someone who probably looked like she was 11 years old climb out of a window, and the police look more into finding a body and try to interrogate the last person who saw her alive.
What unfolded in the shadows of her bedroom door left everyone asking, what happened to Nicole? Why did she slip away from her own home? This case delves into the disappearance and murder of a young resident in Blacksburg, Virginia. Back in January 2016, the nights in Western Virginia were chilly, covered in a blanket of fallen snow. While the scenery might have seemed magnificent to some, for Nicole Lovell's parents, it left haunting memories.
Nicole touched many people throughout her short life.
On one of those cold January nights, Nicole ran away from her home and never made it back. On the night of January 26, 2016, Nicole's mother, Tammy, sent her 13-year-old daughter, Nicole Lovell, off to bed. The nightmare for Tammy unfolded on the morning of January 27, 2016, when she went to wake up Nicole for school. Despite trying hard to push open the door and calling out to her, there was no response from Nicole.
When I went to her room, I noticed that her nightstand was up against her door. So I kind of pushed it. The whole room was cold. And her window was open. Nicole wasn't there. I was scared. I didn't know where she was. Nothing's ever happened like this before, ever.
Little did Tammy know that after closing Nicole's bedroom door for the night, a whole different plan had been set into motion. Nicole had slyly slid her dresser in front of the door, signaling the start of her escape preparations. Nicole, unlike a typical kid enjoying a late-night TV session or chatting with friends, had other ideas. Around 1 a.m., she slid open her bedroom window, taking a dark blue blanket with a Minions character on it, and set out into the night with her backpack and cell phone. Crunching through the patchy snow, she successfully slipped away from her home at Lantern Ridge Apartments on Fairfax Road. The big questions were, where did Nicole go? And why did she choose to make this unexpected escape? With a myriad of questions racing through Tammy's mind, she didn't hesitate. The moment she realized Nicole was missing, she swiftly reported it to Blacksburg law enforcement. Nicole's family was desperate to unravel the mystery. Where was Nicole, and how was she doing? The search for answers began, fueled by concern and the need to find their beloved daughter.
We love you. We want you to come home. We're not mad. We're not mad.
She's not in any kind of trouble.
No trouble. I know she thinks I'm going to be mad, but I'm not. We're not. Because of the medicine. I just want her to take it and be home with us. Give her a hug and a kiss. Like she gave me last night before she took a shower.
Cole, honey, if you see this, if you're out there, you can come to me. I'm not mad at you. I'm worried about you. Your family's worried about you. Just come home.
The voice you just heard was of David Lovell, Nicole's father. Nicole and her father had a tough relationship. He'd been in prison for a drug charge and had other run-ins with the law. All Nicole ever wanted was her dad's love and attention, something that seemed out of reach. To ensure Nicole could have a decent life, David chose to live apart from her. As local TV and radio stations spread the word about the missing girl, police, fire departments, and rescue teams sprang into action across the community to kick off their urgent search.
Blacksburg police asking for your help tonight to find a missing 13-year-old girl.
Nicole Lovell was last seen Tuesday night at her family's apartment. Police say local, state, and federal agencies are now involved. They're approaching this case from all angles.
However, beneath the surface, there was another side to Nicole's story. A dark chapter that added complexity to the unfolding story.
I went to see if she had took any of her liver medicine, and she hadn't took any. And that was really bad. She would get sick quick without her medicine, and then it would get fatal.
Nicole faced a tough start to life, being born with a damaged liver that required a transplant before she turned 1. Despite undergoing a serious surgery, as a teenager, she still depended on anti-rejection medication twice a day to keep her illness at bay and stay healthy. Missing even a couple of doses could pose serious, potentially deadly problems, and that was the family's greatest worry. Finding Nicole quickly became a matter of utmost importance for her well-being. The FBI teamed up with local and state law enforcement to find Nicole. They spread the word far and wide, even amongst the local community. Lots of folks who knew the area well, especially the Forson Mountains, joined in the search. Students from Virginia Tech stepped up too. They joined the mission to find Nicole, and they even brought in drones to search from above.
A Virginia Tech drone used infrared technology from the skies throughout the day.
They are still focusing on the mile radius or so around Nicole's home. They are getting both a ground look and a view from the air thanks to a drone from the Mid-Atlantic Aviation Partnership at Virginia Tech.
The Virginia Tech Corps of Cadets pitched in as well, all working together in the search effort. Nicole's disappearance also sent shockwaves to her hometown Blacksburg, as their tight-knit community, known for being close and supportive, had over 1,200 people stepping up to help in the search. Everyone worked together, desperately trying their best to find 13-year-old Nicole. Amid the ongoing searches across the region, a poignant candlelight vigil also took place for Nicole and her family. Hundreds from the community gathered at Lantern Ridge Apartments, where they prayed for her safe return, sang hymns, and offered unwavering support for her family and each other. She was nowhere to be found, and there was no way to reach her. Her medication was crucial for her survival, and with each passing day, there was still no news about her. The winter days seemed to dim the hope of her parents.
We love you, Nicole. We miss you. We want you home.
The big question remained, where could Nicole possibly be? The answer to this looming question wasn't far off, as 3 days later, on January 30th, 2016, Nicole's parents faced the most devastating news of their lives.
Missing 13-year-old Nicole Lovell's remains were found by police today.
It's with heavy heart that I have to announce that we've located the remains of 13-year-old Nicole Madison Lovell.
Since then, officers from 7 agencies, including the FBI, focused on a 1-mile radius around Nicole's home. And then in a news conference held tonight, authorities delivered the news that no one wanted to hear. They say that her body was found in Surrey County, North Carolina, near the state's border.
Nicole's lifeless and naked body was discovered in a wooded area, down an embankment just across the state line in Surrey County, North Carolina, off North Carolina Route 89. Though it might seem like a remote spot for those unfamiliar with the area, it was actually not far from a fairly traveled road. The entire community was in shock, but for Nicole's mother, Tammy, life seemed to crumble in just a matter of minutes.
Because she was my everything. Nicole touched many people throughout her short life.
The question of who could have committed such a horrible act against Nicole lingered in everyone's mind. In the quest for answers, Tammy received unsettling news from a neighbor. She said that before vanishing, Tammy had been playing with her daughters and casually mentioned to them about going on a secret date with a man.
And she was talking about this boyfriend she had that was 18 and went to college, and showed some text messages off of Kik and pictures. And actually, there's 2 other little girls up the street here that actually pointed his picture out. They go to school with her.
Yes, you heard that right. 13-year-old Nicole had plans for a secret date on the night of January 26, 2016, which led her to run away from her home. Just like millions of teens, Nicole also spent a good amount of time on social media. Tammy was now worried that she might have left to meet someone she connected with online. But what actually happened in those 3 days after Nicole's disappearance? First, let's go back again to the day of her disappearance. When the police searched her house on January 27, 2016, they stumbled upon a vital clue in her bedroom. Nicole had left behind an important key to the mystery by her own hands. In her bedroom, the young girl had written down usernames and passwords for her online apps on the wall.
So during the investigation, law enforcement was going through Nicole's digital footprint, going through her social media.
The FBI computer experts traced Nicole's account information and quickly discovered that she'd frequently used Kik and Omegle chat apps, which are quite popular among teens. These apps caught their attention due to their appeal to young users. These sites allow kids to chat with people without their family knowing and while maintaining their anonymity. However, because of this anonymity and lack of proper oversight, these sites have gained a reputation as places where predators and groomers operate. It's a concerning side to these platforms that attract users looking for secrecy. Tammy told investigators that she found Kik on her daughter's phone before her disappearance and it made her delete it. However, it became clear that Nicole went back to these apps and used them a lot. The usernames and passwords Nicole wrote down turned out to be the key to unraveling this terrible case.
What was being found indicated that Nicole was pretty much a typical 13-year-old girl.
Online, Nicole's persona reflected the struggles many middle schoolers face entering their teen years. She felt misunderstood and unloved, craving attention and wanting to be seen as an adult.
She hung out with her friends and went to the mall. She, wanted a boyfriend, but also she had her insecurities.
Nicole longed for acceptance, especially concerning her appearance, as she believed the scars from her early surgeries were unattractive.
She was perhaps a little bit depressed. She was down on herself.
Experts went into Nicole's accounts and traced her through texts, photos, and other messages to understand what she was up to beyond interactions with school friends and family.
One of her friends had stated that Nicole was supposed to have essentially a secret date that night.
The FBI urgently asked Kik for Nicole's personal account using an emergency disclosure request, which led them to a surprising discovery. Nicole, during her online activities, had come across a predator she was secretly involved with.
It was learned that Nicole's last communication was with an individual who had the username of Dr. Tombstone.
And he went by the name Dr. Tombstone. The FBI's cyber squad worked with Kik to trace the data trail from Nicole's communications and unravel the details of her interactions with this individual. The mystery deepened when it turned out that the sole person Nicole had been talking to before she vanished was Dr. Tombstone.
That was very concerning and certainly increased the likelihood that there was foul play involved in her disappearance.
Cyber detectives dug deeper and uncovered that the username belonged to someone named David A., and it was linked to a Gmail account.
They learned that Dr. Tombstone belonged to someone by the name of David Eisenhower.
Following the digital breadcrumbs, they found an 18-year-old young man, and he was identified as David Eisenhower.
David Eisenhower, we learned, was an 18-year-old freshman at Virginia Tech.
He was a freshman at Virginia Tech and was attracted to the college for its excellent engineering program. He was also a standout track athlete at Wild Lake High School near Baltimore, Maryland, earning recognition as Athlete of the Week on a local TV news broadcast during his senior year.
Dwight David Eisenhower was the 34th president of the United States.
His brother Milton was president of Johns Hopkins.
David Eisenhower was the president's grandson who married Richard Nixon's daughter.
We went the distance to tell you about one of the greatest distance runners this state has, and his name is David Eisenhower. David is no relation to the president. Their last names are spelled differently. But this David Eisenhower left the west coast of Washington and invaded East Coast running like a battle plan from General Eisenhower.
I make my personal goals achievable, or just out of reach of achievable. That way I'm always constantly striving to better myself. If that goal becomes a record, or if that goal is past a record, or records get broken in the process, I consider that like a milestone goal, but that's not where I ultimately want to end up. I just have this internal thing saying I want to be the best. There is no reason why I cannot be as good as other people are. I will personally not stop until I reach my peak performance, which could be anywhere.
At first glance, David appeared like any other freshman at the big university. However, he faced a challenge because he had a habit of sharing quirky stories, trying to make himself seem as someone more experienced and more worldly than he actually was. People started doubting David's credibility because he seemed too eager to impress others, which caused a quick trust issue.
He was a very celebrated student. He always had straight A's, and he was sort of cocky, and he was like, yeah, I'm David Eisenhower. I was just on the local news. I'm a big deal.
3 days after Nicole disappeared, on January 29th, 2016, the police picked up David for questioning before her body was found. They brought him in because he was the last person who had seen Nicole alive.
At the beginning of the interview, I told him why we were there, and we felt like he could help us with the investigation.
At first, the questioning seemed routine.
I was bored in my dorm room and logged on to a website where you go and you just talk to random strangers.
The detective informed David about Nicole's disappearance, mentioning they knew that she was on a date with him that night. David explained that when he picked up Nicole from her house that night, he had no idea she was only 13 years old.
And she's like, yeah, I'm 16 or 17. I do not remember the age, she said. I get there, and then I see someone who probably looked like she was 11 years old climb out of a window, and I was like, not for me.
David said he walked away after meeting Nicole, but the detective found it strange. It couldn't be that simple, especially since only after that did Nicole go missing. At that point in the interview, the detective challenged David, sensing there was more to the story.
I'd stop you there. I feel like we're getting sideways. So it's not going to be possible for us to believe that account.
At first, David denied having any more information about Nicole, insisting he never saw or texted her after their meeting. However, after some time, he made a strange comment that raised suspicion, a comment that made him a prime suspect in Nicole's disappearance.
I think the police should look more into finding a body than try to interrogate the last person who saw her alive, who clearly left the scene.
David was arrested right after the interview, and it was decided that he'd be held in custody while they continued to investigate.
David Eisenhower, stand up and put your hands behind your back. You are under arrest.
But the detective caught a hidden clue during the interview when David said he went to see a friend right after walking away from Nicole. This detail became a key piece of information for the investigation.
After he walked away from Nicole, that he'd gone to see a friend. And that's when he identified Natalie Keepers.
Natalie Keepers, a student at Virginia Tech studying engineering, had traveled from eastern Maryland to the mountains of western Virginia. Although bookish and serious, the 20-year-old had a brief romantic relationship with David when they both arrived on campus. However, their connection shifted to a close friendship soon after.
She willingly went with us to the police department and actually spoke very highly of him.
I mean, David, he's a really sweet guy. He's like my best friend.
Now, while the interview unfolded, investigators were busy downloading information from David and Natalie's phones.
Law enforcement is going through it. They find text messages between David and Natalie.
The cyber squad, including law enforcement and the FBI, sifted through the data and stumbled upon some jaw-dropping text messages exchanged between David and Natalie.
In particular, there were text messages between David and Natalie talking about cleaning up blood, talking about the smell of blood.
In those messages, they discussed cleaning up someone's blood, talked about the smell of blood, and even mentioned trying to cover up a crime scene.
They're talking about trying to cover up a crime scene.
These weren't typical messages for any tech student. When Natalie was confronted with these texts, that's when she finally came clean and revealed the truth.
We know that you have information about this. What do you think of the phone on your phone?
According to Natalie, David was the one who killed Nicole, and she had just helped him.
Natalie, how much are you involved in this?
He forced me to help him move her body.
In the next few hours, Natalie revealed the eerie tale of what happened with Nicole on the night of January 26, 2016, and why it happened. The story kicked off in the fall of 2015 when David and Nicole began chatting online and soon developed an attraction for each other. Interestingly, David always thought that Nicole was 17 or 18 years old.
We're talking, and she's like, yeah, I'm 16 or 17. I do not remember the age, she said.
As they continued chatting, David and Nicole planned to meet in December 2015. Now, Nicole couldn't hide her age, and maybe David was also surprised when they met, but he decided to brush it off.
I get there, and then I see someone who probably looked like she was 11 years old climb out of a window.
Their growing feelings took them down a risky path, and the meeting set off a chain of events with consequences neither of them anticipated. Following that meeting, David's behavior took a sharp turn. He sensed that he'd crossed a line, something that couldn't be undone. Dread filled him as he realized the potential consequences of his actions and what they might bring down on him. David opened up to his friend Natalie that he was having a problem, and his problem was none other than Nicole.
Natalie was saying that Nicole wanted to start a relationship, and David really wanted nothing to do with her.
He was concerned because Nicole was still underage, and he worried about the possibility of her being pregnant after their first meeting.
He was getting nervous that Nicole would somehow expose him for having sex with her. So David felt that he needed to get rid of her.
So he attempted to put the brakes on his relationship with Nicole, and also to stop communicating with her out of fear of legal trouble. However, Nicole dropped a bombshell. She threatened to take her own life if he ended their relationship. Was Nicole responsible for her impulsive reactions, or was David the one who manipulated Nicole from their very first meeting onwards? Somehow, caught in the shadow of a potential pregnancy and the fear of being discovered, David and Natalie tragically concluded that a drastic solution was necessary. In their misguided view, they believed the only way out was Nicole's death.
On the night that Nicole Lovell went missing, Natalie said she and David went to a fast food restaurant to finalize the plan.
Now, to carry out their plan, David and Nicole needed some specific materials, and to gather them a day before Nicole's disappearance, they headed to a local Walmart.
We went to Walmart.
There, they bought a big garden shovel, and the security cameras caught them leaving with their purchase. Little did they know the shovel would later be linked to the crime and would be discovered with traces of Nicole's blood on it. Natalie insisted that she wasn't present there for the next part of the plan, but also admitted her involvement in the planning. What happened next was David and Nicole coordinating on the night of January 26, 2016.
The plan was to take her to a secluded location, to almost make it like a date.
With a complete escape plan, Nicole eagerly waited for David's arrival. So when David showed up, Nicole, holding her favorite blue blanket, backpack, and phone, dashed out of her house and hopped into David's car. The pair then drove to a spot on Craig Creek Road near the Virginia Tech campus. This road is a narrow one, winding through a wooded area. Houses and trailers are scattered along the rural road, sometimes with quite a distance between them. In some parts, there's no direct line of sight from one neighbor's place to the next, which just added to the secluded atmosphere. On that chilly Wednesday night, with the temperature dropping fast, the two drove down the dark and desolate road. Around 1 or 2 a.m., David pulled over in the secluded area, and both of them stepped out into the cold. In that remote spot, Nicole had no way of knowing what was about to happen with her. David's horrifying actions were revealed by the autopsy reports of Nicole. It clearly showed that Nicole was struck in the neck with a shovel, which broke one of her vertebrae.
And then he stabbed her. He killed her in the woods.
As Nicole fell to the ground, she was still alive, and David, without any hesitation, unleashed a cruel attack by stabbing her 14 times. 7 of those stabs targeted her head and face, while the other 7 struck her chest, and the fatal blow came from a throat slash. Nicole, a child who had bravely faced a liver transplant and was cherished by her family, tragically lost her life on a lonely, cold January night, falling victim to a heartless murder. David, in a terrifying turn, placed her lifeless body in the trunk of his car, along with her belongings, the cherished Minions blanket and the grim tools, a shovel and a knife. He then returned to his car and drove straight home. In the warmth of his house, he spent the night, possibly haunted by the weight of his actions. Meanwhile, Nicole's lifeless body endured the cold temperatures, dropping into the mid-20s before the first light, in stark contrast to the warmth she once knew and her family's love. That fateful night along the road, nobody reported anything unusual, and the murder slipped by unnoticed into the wee hours of the morning. The next day, on January 27th, 2016, David texted Natalie, setting their sinister plan in motion.
The next day, he told me that he needed help.
They hopped into David's car and headed to a secluded spot just across the North Carolina line. David's phone revealed that he'd asked someone in Pulaski, Virginia, about a place to dispose of a body. Police later figured that the person may have thought David was joking and didn't grasp the seriousness of his inquiry. As they drove along North Carolina Route 89, the pair spotted a suitable spot not far from a property owned by a member of David's extended family. They took Nicole's body, stripped it, and cleaned it meticulously to erase any traces of evidence. Afterward, they dumped her remains down a wooded embankment.
Nicole was located off the main road going off the side of a mountain. She was stabbed a number of times. She was not buried. They apparently had just tossed her from the edge.
Texts exchanged between David and Natalie revealed that they believed the cold weather would help minimize any odor of blood, and in such a remote area, nature would handle the body's disposal. Before the murder, David had also conducted several online searches, seeking answers to questions like how long it takes to burn a body and what details police use for identification. However, his inability to find the right answers played a significant role in his eventual downfall. When Nicole's body was discovered, it was fortunately intact until that point. While the evidence had mostly stacked up in electronic form, David had clammed up about the murder at the police station. On the flip side, Natalie, gripped by fear, spilled all the details to law enforcement. Now, moving beyond screens and words, physical evidence of the murder was in hand. Forensic experts were piecing together the evidence to uncover who was truly responsible for Nicole's tragic fate.
She thought it was exciting that really Natalie was kind of the mastermind behind all of this.
In the thorough search of the scene where Nicole's body was found, investigators discovered crucial evidence. Scraps of skin, which remained unnoticed in attempts to clean the body by David and Natalie, were found under Nicole's nails. These tiny bits of skin turned out to be important DNA evidence, revealing that Nicole had scratched David before her tragic end. Now, while searching for clues, other law enforcement officers and forensic teams turned their attention to dumpsters and bins at Virginia Tech. A dive team plunged into the campus pond, uncovering a surprising find: a bottle of Clorox and numerous wipes coated in mysterious brown stains.
Another angle on the story, the search for evidence in the police investigation of Nicole's killing continues today. State police dive teams searched a lake on Virginia Tech's campus for the second day in a row, while a criminal investigations unit is stationed in the Jefferson National Forest using surveying tools to collect evidence as well.
These discoveries raised questions about their connection in Nicole's murder. The investigation took a chilling turn as blood traces were uncovered in the trunk of David's car. However, the potentially damning evidence came in the form of a bag discovered among Natalie's possessions. Inside the bag, bloody clothing and Nicole's distinctive dark blue Minions blanket were carefully stowed away. Were these pieces of evidence meant for disposal later, or kept as some macabre trophy? David found himself in serious trouble when on January 29, 2016, he was officially arrested. Natalie was arrested and charged 2 days later on the 31st.
Stunning new details in the murder of a 13-year-old girl making national headlines. Authorities say social media likely played a role in her death. This is one of the suspects you're looking at, a former high school track star. His friend in college is also charged, and tonight prosecutors say that friend has now revealed much of the alleged plot.
With this arrest, investigators are very much in the midst of what is a rapidly developing investigation. We appreciate the public's patience as we move through the investigative process, and we will continue to update the media and the public as new information becomes available.
The charges included their involvement in the abduction and murder of Nicole Lovell, as well as disposing of her body. Facing the charges, both David and Natalie entered not guilty pleas, but their defense took an intriguing turn.
And then the defense had a twist we didn't anticipate.
Instead of denying involvement, they shifted the focus to determining the mastermind behind the plan. David's defense suggested that Natalie played the role of the mastermind, manipulating him into carrying out the tragic act against Nicole in that secluded spot.
They were going to try and show that David did not kill Nicole. It was Natalie that killed Nicole.
They'd argue that the idea to commit a murder, she thought it was exciting. That really Natalie was kind of the mastermind behind all of this.
At times, Natalie's character was portrayed as a sociopath, relishing the thrill of planning and carrying out Nicole's murder from start to finish. However, Natalie's defense argued that she didn't physically participate in Nicole Lovell's actual killing, and her attorneys insisted she wasn't directly involved in the tragic act. The evidence couldn't point to Natalie being at the scene of the murder, but it became clear that maybe she had not been physically present during the tragic act, but Natalie had significant input before and after the event. She had an active role in disposing of Nicole's body and concealing evidence. In the end, both David and Nicole were held responsible for Nicole's murder. While David carried out the act, Nicole was deeply involved in the planning, making them both equally accountable. Finally, in June 2018, David faced the consequences as he was found guilty on all counts. The verdict brought a 10-year sentence for the abduction, a hefty 60 years for first-degree murder, and an additional 5 years for concealing Nicole's body. However, 15 years of the sentence were suspended, and he got tagged with 20 years of probation. On top of that, he was ordered to pay $5,130 in restitution. On the other hand, in September 2018, Natalie Keepers faced her own judgment and was found guilty as an accessory to first-degree murder.
Prosecutor telling the court 19-year-old Natalie Keepers helped plan the murder of the 7th grader she had never met or spoken to, saying she was, quote, excited to be part of something secretive and special with her friend, David Eisenhower.
Her sentence included a hefty 40 years in prison for the accessory charge and an extra 5 years for concealing the body. However, 5 years of the sentence were suspended. Interestingly, she received double the recommended 20 years for the accessory charge, emphasizing the gravity of her involvement in the tragic events. The legal outcome underscored the severity of her role as an accomplice in Nicole's murder. David and Natalie are destined to spend most of their lives behind bars, a consequence that can never bring Nicole Lovell back. All she sought was acceptance and love, like many other teens, but that chance was tragically stolen from her. Her family now carries wounds that time can never fully heal, leaving an unfillable hole in their hearts. That cold January night not only left a void in the mountain town of Blacksburg, Virginia, but it also left the entire community in disbelief. The impact of Nicole's loss is a lasting, chilling reminder to the community. When the man who abducted a young woman from the streets received a 60-year prison sentence, there was a collective sigh of relief among the community, thinking he was off the streets and no longer a threat for anyone. Little did they know the darker secrets of his heinous deeds were yet to unfold. The 60-year sentence turned out to be just the tip of the iceberg, as he faced more shocking revelations, unraveling a twisted tale that took years to fully reveal. Who was this man, and what were the long-hidden secrets? Texas, the second-largest state in the United States, boasts a diverse landscape, rich history, and vibrant culture. From the iconic deserts of West Texas to the bustling urban centers like Houston and Dallas, the state has a lot to offer. However, Texas has also been the backdrop for some notorious crimes. In Texas, Interstate 45 has been a scary place for years. It goes through swamps and the derrick oil fields between Galveston and Houston. This highway is linked to many unsolved murders over the years. Deputy Chief Josh Rogers from Texas says that 1997 was a particularly deadly year, and especially dangerous along this route, with a high number of deadly incidents. But what really happened here? To look into it, we'll begin with the case involving Laura Smither. On April 3, 1997, at around 9 a.m., 12-year-old Laura Smither asked her mother if she could go for a jog alone. Little did her mom know that saying yes to this request would bring her lasting pain. Laura, born to Bob and Gay Smither, had a happy upbringing in the city of Friendswood, Texas, with her younger brother David. She was known for being kind and gentle. Laura was a smart student and a talented ballet dancer. Her dream of becoming a ballerina was starting to come true, as she'd recently been accepted into the Houston Ballet Academy. While making breakfast, Laura's mother said it was okay for her to go on a short jog, as she'd recently started cardio and was trying hard to improve her ballet. But when Laura didn't come back after a period of time, her parents started to panic. Laura was never out on her own for so long, and since she was always under their watchful eye being a homeschooled child, they sensed something was amiss. Laura's father went out and searched the neighborhood, but there was no trace of her. Now, getting more worried, they also called relatives and her friends to check if anyone had seen her, but got no answers. With Laura nowhere to be found, they decided to call the Friendswood police and report her as missing. As the police began looking into it, folks from the community rallied around Laura's family, joining forces to help in the search.
She's a beautiful child. She is loving, she's kind, she's sensitive, she's very intelligent, very responsible. I just pray for her and I pray for her family and I pray she comes back okay. And my kids, I'm not letting them from my sight ever.
They made flyers with Laura's picture and went around asking everyone in the area if they knew anything about the missing girl. Laura's parents were deeply touched by the community's support and their love for Laura.
Friendswood has been just amazing. We've had many people come by and they're putting flyers out in all the stores. Places they can take.
The community loves her very much. She's a very special girl.
No one is in there.
No, she's coming back.
The next morning, the police were out looking for the little girl. Some officers searched through the woods on foot, and helicopters were used to search from the skies, but they didn't find any clues. Despite this, the community stayed strong, with hundreds of volunteers who joined Laura's family to search for the 12-year-old. About 6,000 volunteers participated in the week-long campaign, and instead of losing steam, each day brought more volunteers and improved tracking methods, like using an infrared camera to find clues. A search and rescue team with specially trained dogs even came from Dallas to help. These dogs, with an amazing sense of smell, spent the whole day sniffing around Laura's home, picking up scents from as far as 800 yards away.
We were testing timelines along roadways where they might have traveled.
There's still optimism. We're going to bring Laura home safe. We're just going to keep the pressure on, and it's going to happen.
The police were working hard, and even the National Coast Guard and FBI joined the local police to help in the search for Laura. While they initially thought she might be lost in the woods, as the investigation went on, they started to suspect foul play. To keep the search going, the community organized candlelight rallies and vigils in Laura's name.
For a community to come this close together for something, I don't even know where to go. I mean, I've lived in Friendswood for 20 years, sorry, I don't even know her. But I know if something would happen to my kids, I would want somebody to help me.
And when we first begun.
Another week went by with no progress in Laura's case. On Sunday, April 20th, 1997, the community gathered at Friendswood High School to discuss what to do next. During the meeting, the police chief got a phone call. The worried look on his face made people fear the worst, but they didn't know what had happened. Around 10 p.m. that day, Laura's parents were informed about the horrifying discovery. Earlier that day, a father and son walking their dog found the badly decomposed body of a young girl in a muddy area near a pond in Pasadena, just 12 miles from where Laura disappeared. The girl had only a pair of socks on, and the police suspected it was Laura. The autopsy later confirmed their fears. 17 days after she disappeared, Laura was found, but it was a heartbreaking discovery. Because Laura had been in the water for weeks, the exact cause of her death couldn't be determined, and investigators weren't sure if she'd been physically assaulted. The whole Friendswood area was shocked and heartbroken about the tragic loss of this little girl. Alongside the sadness, there was also a lot of fear. People were worried that a dangerous person might be out there looking for more victims. In an urgent effort to find leads, the police started questioning sex offenders in the area. Even with many unknowns, a suspect came into focus quite soon. This person had been released just 6 months before Laura's murder after serving 10 years in an Oklahoma prison for 2 physical assaults. He was working in Windsor Estate in Friendswood as an equipment operator when Laura went missing. Strangely, on that day, he left work around the same time Laura disappeared and returned 30 minutes later. When the investigators checked his truck, they discovered fibers from his replacement floor mats that matched fibers on Laura's socks. Even as the police kept looking for stronger evidence against him, the man stayed free, moving between Houston, where he worked, and Oklahoma, where his mother lived. However, not much time had passed when, just 2 months later, on July 15, 1997, in Denton, Texas, a university town along the same stretch of interstate, 20-year-old Kelly Cox disappeared.
She was pretty amazing young lady. She was very focused, had a plan.
Kelly would usually spend her mornings studying at the University of North Texas, and the rest of her days being a mother to her daughter Alexis. On July 15th, just like any other day, Kelly got everything ready for her daughter, packing her bag with necessary things before they hurried out the door.
I said, well, I love you, honey. Have a good day. I'll talk to you this afternoon. Those were my last words.
Kelly dropped her 19-month-old daughter Alexis with a babysitter and went on a field trip to a Denton jail for her criminology class with her classmates. She parked her car across from the police station, and to be safe, she hid a spare key in a magnetic box under her car. After locking up her things, including her phone, in the car as her professor advised, Kelly took a tour of the jail. She left promptly after the tour ended around noon because she had a test at the university. Strangely, when she tried to leave, her spare key didn't work on her car door, even though she'd checked it the night before. The key that had been working hours earlier had now mysteriously stopped working. Since Kelly couldn't access her cell phone, which was locked in the car, she walked to a nearby gas station and used a payphone to call her boyfriend Lawrence Harris for assistance. She requested him to bring another key because the one she had suddenly stopped working. After the call, she went inside the gas station to have a drink. When Lawrence got there about 45 minutes later, Kelly's car was still in the parking lot, but she was gone. The key box and the key were also nowhere to be found. After searching for Kelly for a while, Lawrence got worried and called Kelly's mother to check if she'd made it home, but she hadn't. Even though the situation was already raising eyebrows, Kelly's family gave it some time, hoping she'd come back. But by 5:30 p.m. that afternoon, they knew something was off. Kelly was supposed to pick up her 19-month-old daughter Alexis from the babysitter's house at 5:30, but she didn't show up. This was when people really started to worry, because Kelly, despite being young, was known for being a responsible mother. It seemed unlikely that she'd neglect to pick up Alexis or fail to make alternative arrangements for her if needed. Once the missing persons report was filed, investigators promptly began searching for the young mother. Their first step was questioning everyone close to Kelly to gather information.
We're going to look at anyone that she may be seeing, any close friends that she spends time with, and her boyfriend was one of those.
But after passing 4 polygraph tests, Lawrence was ruled out as a suspect. Shockingly, it was a twist of events when investigators followed a tip that led them to another person, a man who'd been a suspect in Laura Smithers' case. Even though he didn't live in Denton, a gas station receipt placed him there on the day Kelly disappeared. As a sex offender, he became a priority suspect, and the police searched his car for Kelly's fingerprints. Strangely, they found none, leaving them with no further evidence to connect him to the disappearance. It was a mystery why this man, even though suspected, managed to slip away each time. Who was he, and what was his story? Without answering any of the questions, soon the case went cold with no leads, witnesses, or surveillance footage. For many years, Kelly's mother felt a deep sadness each time a body was found along the infamous highway in Texas. She held on to hope that one day Kelly would come back home, but sadly, that day never arrived.
Every single day you ask that question, is today the day that she's going to come through the door, she's going to call on the phone, or the police department's going to call, and we have answered.
Kelly's disappearance was tough on her mother and stepfather, especially as they had to raise little Alexis on their own. But the hardest part was making young Alexis understand that her mother wasn't likely to return to give her warmth and motherly love.
She drew pictures of Kelly, and she said, Nana, here's pictures. I drew pictures for posters to go up on in the park to look for mommy. And it was, I mean, when I look at those pictures, it just brings tears to my eyes.
I would just tell her I love her and I missed her.
Despite the passing years, Kelly never returned to her daughter. Following her mother's path, Alexis went to the same university as Kelly had, holding on to the hope that her mother might come back one day. Throughout all those years, Kelly's family never gave up hope. They kept sharing her story and never stopped putting her picture everywhere she could. But sadly, even after numerous efforts, Kelly never made it home. However, the shocks weren't going to end, as just 11 days after Kelly went missing in Oklahoma, another young woman was about to disappear. On June 26, 1997, around midnight, a patrol officer from the Bethany Police Department saw a white neon Dodge left at a car wash. Initially, it didn't seem unusual to the officer, but when he came back later and saw the car still there, he got suspicious. While walking up to the car, he noticed that the key was still in the ignition and the car door was open. He quickly sent the license plate number to headquarters and learned that the car belonged to 17-year-old Tiffany Johnson. When the officer checked inside, he found Tiffany's purse, and in the glove box, he discovered a phone number that belonged to Tiffany's mother, Kathy, who lived in Anadarko, 60 miles away from Bethany.
I received a call from the Bethany Police Department wanting to know if Tiffany was with me. I told them no, she was supposed to meet her new husband, Ryan.
So now the investigators made their next call to Ryan, Tiffany's husband, who was just as clueless about his wife's whereabouts. It was becoming clear that something wasn't right. He shared with the officer that Tiffany left the restaurant where she worked part-time around 2 p.m. that day, as she was excited about celebrating their third-month anniversary. But she was only supposed to meet him at 11 p.m., so on her way home, Tiffany stopped by the Sunshine Car Wash to clean up her white neon Dodge. However, when Ryan was supposed to meet her later that night, he couldn't find any signs of her, and she wasn't at home either. Being worried and tense, he first considered contacting the police, but then decided to wait a bit longer in hopes that Tiffany would return on her own. But even before the police had a chance to search for Tiffany, they received heartbreaking news. Just a day after she went missing, on July 27, 1997, near I-40 in Gregory Road, searchers looking for another missing girl stumbled upon the lifeless body of a young Caucasian woman. When the police arrived, they were already thinking it might be Tiffany, and their suspicions were confirmed when Ryan saw her pictures and quickly identified her as his wife. Sadly, she was found with only a swimsuit on, and all of her other clothes were taken off. While the autopsy couldn't pinpoint the exact time of her death, it indicated that she'd been physically assaulted and strangled. They even found unknown DNA on her body, which they collected and kept as evidence. With such a case, anyone could be a suspect, and their suspicion landed on someone very close to Tiffany.
So in this case, we had a dead wife. Now we have a living husband, and oftentimes the husband is responsible for the death of the wife.
However, it didn't take long to find out that Tiffany was last seen at the car wash at 6 p.m., and during that time, Ryan was at work, and he'd been there from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. So, looking at the timeline, the police realized that it didn't make sense that Tiffany was abducted from the car wash because it was busy. And if someone had tried to take her by force, there likely would have been a big struggle. But the area where a car was found didn't show any signs of a struggle, and even the car was unlocked. Nothing seemed disturbed around that spot. This made the police think about the possibility that Tiffany might have willingly gotten into the car with someone she knew and left with them. While the investigation was still going on a few days later, Tiffany's mother, Kathy, received a phone call from a man named William Reese, someone she knew from her town of Anadarko. While they hadn't met in person, William's mother was good friends with Tiffany's mother. He called Kathy shortly after Tiffany's death to express condolences, but she was unaware of hidden secrets. However, as time passed, there was still no progress in the investigation, and the case eventually ended up in the cold case files. With the continuing murders of women in the area, the whole community was questioning when this game of horror would end. Just 3 weeks after Tiffany's murder, another tragedy struck Lamar, Texas. Born on August 28, 1979, Jessica Kane brought joy to her parents, C.H. and Susie Kane. With a passion for sports, she served as the drill team captain at O'Connell High School in Galveston, Texas. On August 16, 1997, after performing in a musical review in Dickinson and attending a cast party at Bennigan's on Bay Area Boulevard, Jessica didn't return home after a night out with friends. Not finding her at home the next morning, in a panic, Jessica's mother urgently woke up her father, and they started trying to reach Jessica. Despite their efforts, they couldn't get hold of her, so they reached out to several friends who were with Jessica the night before. All of them shared the same story. Jessica left the party around 1:30 a.m., and after that, no one had heard from her. Jessica's parents got worried, especially when her father found her car parked by the freeway near the Lamarck exit. Her belongings were still inside, but Jessica was nowhere to be seen. Being extremely worried, he immediately called the police to report her missing. Once again, search parties scoured the area for another missing girl, with over 100 volunteers exploring on foot among the marshes and through the brush. During this challenging time, Jessica's parents found solace in connecting with two individuals who understood their pain, Bob and Gay Smither, Laura Smither's parents. The Smithers, despite reliving their own nightmare, stood strong in supporting Jessica's parents and actively participated in the search efforts. They shared the concern of whether the person responsible for Jessica's disappearance was the same one who took their own daughter's life. Despite extensive searches by law enforcement in the community, no signs of Jessica emerged. Police began to entertain the possibility of foul play and expressed a grim belief that finding Jessica alive was unlikely. However, amidst the ongoing search, a new story surfaced about another case where the victim had managed to survive. Back on May 16, 1997, 3 months before Jessica went missing, 19-year-old mother Sandra Sapal had a disturbing encounter. She stopped at a convenience store in Webster, Texas, off I-45, and noticed a man staring at her in the parking lot. Later, at a Waffle House across the street, she saw the same man again. He followed her to the store and asked if she needed some help because her tires were flat. Suddenly, he pulled out a knife and forcibly took Sandra into his white pickup truck. Inside the truck, the man overpowered her and tied her wrists before driving along Interstate 45. Being terrified, Sandra discovered that the truck door was unlocked. In a desperate move to escape, she broke free from the restraints and jumped out of the moving truck, but suffered serious injuries during her escape. She was later taken to a nearby hospital where the police were contacted and the incident was reported. 5 months later, in October 1997, during a meeting with Friendswood Police, Webster investigators realized that Sandra's description of her abductor's pickup matched a truck they had searched in Laura's case. On October 16, 1997, when a lineup was conducted, Sandra swiftly identified the man who had abducted her, and he was none other than William Reese. The question arose, who was he? And was he the same suspect back in April 1997 in Laura's case? William Lewis Reese was born on July 1, 1959 in Oklahoma, and he grew up in Yukon and Anadarko. He was one of 13 siblings. Because of his family's financial struggles, he had to stop going to school in the 9th grade and started working as a farm laborer. He was married twice, but both marriages didn't last long. In April 1986, William kidnapped a 19-year-old daughter of a Texas sheriff's deputy, for which he got arrested and charged, but was released after paying bail. Just a month later, while out on bond, he physically assaulted another woman, leading to another arrest. He faced trial for both crimes, was found guilty, and received a 25-year prison sentence. However, he appealed his conviction, and a criminal court reviewed his case. They found some procedural errors, which led to a reduction in his 25-year sentence. He was granted parole in October 1996 after serving around 9.5 years. This release happened just 6 months before Laura's disappearance. After leaving prison, William moved into his mother's home in Anadarko, Oklahoma. Coming back to the case, William was promptly arrested in October 1997 and charged with kidnapping Sarah Sapal. He pleaded not guilty and ended up behind bars, but was still not connected to the murders of the other girls. Despite his denial of kidnapping Sarah and slashing her tires, investigators were determined to connect him to Laura's murder. Deputy Chief Josh Rogers mentioned that he found a potential link during a search of William's apartment. They discovered a multicolored horse blanket, and many of those colors matched the ones found on one of Laura's socks. Even though they had fibers from Laura's socks matching William's floor mats, the DA at the time wasn't convinced it was sufficient evidence to charge him with Laura's murder. But Friendswood detectives weren't giving up. They dug into records to track William's movements the previous summer and finally uncovered some potential connections to other unsolved cases, as they refused to give up on solving the mysteries of those murders. It got more interesting when the investigators discovered a fuel bill in Denton on July 15th, the same place and date as Kelly Cox's disappearance. This was the first time Kelly's mother, Jan, had heard about William, and now Denton police had him on their radar too. Throughout their investigation, they also uncovered some records which indicated that William used a payphone in the town where Tiffany's body was found less than an hour after she disappeared. Moreover, the owner of the car wash, upon seeing his picture, confirmed that William was a frequent customer. This new evidence made William the prime suspect in Tiffany's case as well. The jury quickly reached a guilty verdict, and William was convicted in 1998 and received a 60-year sentence for kidnapping Sandra. After a year, finally the community felt a sense of relief knowing William was behind bars. But Laura's case, as well as Tiffany's, Kelly, and Jessica's cases, still officially remained unsolved. While up in Oklahoma, Kathy, Tiffany's mother, never gave up pushing investigators to solve Tiffany's murder. It was after more than a decade when Kathy's persistent calls were finally answered. In 2012, retired police chief Lynn Williams joined the efforts to crack cold cases at the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, and he took on the task of investigating Tiffany's case. Inside the evidence box, Lynn found DNA evidence from Tiffany's body, which was carefully preserved over the years. Despite 2 unsuccessful tests, Wendy Duke, the supervising criminologist at the OSBI Cold Case Unit, discovered 2 samples from Tiffany's body that hadn't been fully used in earlier testing. Miraculously, she managed to develop a partial male profile from these samples. Duke sifted through the known profiles to find a match, and as the team eliminated suspects one by one, they arrived at a shocking discovery. The man who was behind Tiffany's murder was none other than William Reese, a person who was connected to Tiffany's family and who had called to express grief over her death. This revelation led the Oklahoma DA to believe that there was sufficient evidence to charge William for Tiffany's murder. After enduring years of waiting, Kathy finally found some relief as justice seemed within reach. Oklahoma law enforcement shared the breakthrough with Texas investigators, including the Texas Rangers, who were eager to explore if William Reese would cooperate in solving their cases. They visited William in prison, and surprisingly, he agreed to talk further, but with a condition. The death penalty had to be taken off the table. In exchange for his cooperation in solving the cases, authorities agreed to this condition. In February 2016, William Reese was moved from prison to Friendswood Jail after agreeing to provide information about 3 Texas cases. Authorities also took him to a remote field south of Friendswood, where he claimed Kelly Cox's remains were located. Police spent extensive time with William, both in jail and out in the field, searching for Kelly's remains. During this period, he began sharing details with investigators about his encounter with Kelly in Denton. He claimed they'd got into a fight in a gas station parking lot after he accidentally bumped into her, causing her to spill her soda on him.
She woke up. Where did you go from there? Come back to Houston. And she was staying in the back? All the time. I was trying to figure out what the hell am I doing, man? Everything keeps going downhill. Keeps going downhill. I drove out there off of 288 and stayed out there all night. Trying to figure out what the hell am I going to do, man? What am I doing? Things keep getting worse and worse. I had a dozer out there and I dug me a little hole and put her in it.
During the interview, William confessed to killing Kelly, but there was another shocking revelation. He also told investigators what happened to Laura on that rainy morning in Friendswood. William claimed that Laura died instantly after he accidentally hit her with his truck. However, he later changed his story, saying that Laura actually survived. According to him, when he tried to stop her from crying, he accidentally broke her neck.
And when I got out of the truck, there was a little girl down in the ditch, and she was crying and yelling. So I go down the ditch, I'm panicking, and I try and get her to quit screaming. And I put my hand over her mouth, and she was facing away from me, so when I turned her head around, I felt her neck pop, and she got real quiet. And I picked her up, I put her in the truck because I was panicking. I didn't know what to do. And I took her out to this detention pile. She was already dead. I took her clothes off and put her in the water.
Examining Williams' inconsistent statements and behavior, Mara Lino, a retired FBI profiler, suggested that he exhibited traits of psychopathy. She believed that William enjoyed the attention from law enforcement and the disruption to his routine. While the search for remains was ongoing, William continued to confess to every murder, providing details about Jessica and Tiffany's cases and how he buried their bodies at different locations.
I keep thinking I put my hands around her throat and started choking her, but I can't remember.
Okay.
And then I know she was out. I just picked her up and put her in the Jeep, put the seatbelt on her, shut the door, walked around, got in my Jeep, and took off.
In March 2016, after 25 days of determined digging guided by William, there was a breakthrough. Jessica's remains were discovered at a site in Houston Pasture, but her parents requested privacy to process the news and lay their daughter to rest. The discovery of Jessica's remains boosted the credibility of William's statements, and with renewed determination, the search for Kelly continued. It was after 2 more weeks of painstaking effort, they successfully located Kelly's remains at a burial site in Brazoria County. It was the most painful moment for the families who were still holding hope that maybe their daughters would come back alive. In July 2016, Reese was extradited from Texas to Oklahoma to stand trial for the murder of Johnson. The trial began on April 21st, 2017. Reese's defense team filed a motion for change of venue due to asbestos in the courthouse. An independent examination concluded that the building's condition was hazardous, and the trial adjourned until June 2019. In the meantime, prosecutors from Texas announced that they would extradite him to their state to stand trial for the murder of Laura, Kelly, and Jessica after the end of his Oklahoma trial. After Tiffany's trial was indefinitely postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it resumed in May 2021 in the Oklahoma County District Court, and the jury found him guilty on May 28, 2021. The judge didn't mince words, and on August 19, 2021, sentenced him to death for the abduction and murder of Tiffany. Even after William's deal with law enforcement, he received the death sentence because he gave partially false information in his confession and failed to disclose both his true motives for the crime and the accurate details. After being convicted in Oklahoma, William faced another trial in Texas in March 2022 for the murders of Laura Smither, Kelly Cox, and Jessica Kane. It wasn't a surprise that he pleaded guilty to all 3 murders, and the judge delivered the final blow, sentencing him to life imprisonment in June 2022. Justice finally caught up with him for the devastating crimes that he committed against these innocent lives. For years, 4 families yearned for answers about their missing loved ones, enduring the anguish of uncertainty. The person behind these crimes callously hoarded these secrets and revealed them only when it suited his own motives. It's disheartening to witness such selfishness. Now we can only hope that the families, armed with the truth, can embark on the path of healing. Providing their loved ones with a long overdue proper burial might offer some solace after enduring the pain for so many years.
This surveillance video captures the last moments 16-year-old Susana Morales was seen July 26th. She was walking home near Singleton Road and Indian Trail Lilburn Road after visiting a friend.
July 26, 2022 was a typical summer day for the Morales family. At around 6 p.m., 16-year-old Susanna strolled out of her house to visit a friend who lived just a short 10-minute walk away. Everything appeared quite ordinary, and Susanna even texted her mom, Maria, around 10 p.m. to inform her that she'd be coming back home in a few minutes. However, things took a dark turn when the next morning arrived, and Susanna was nowhere to be found.
The investigation is still ongoing, and if there's further charges in the future, those will be known. As of right now, it's still early in...
Even reporting her as missing also became a challenging task. Despite the determined efforts of her family and the community, Susanna never came back home. In retracing Susanna's steps and analyzing her phone location data, a chilling clue emerged in the form of surveillance footage showing Susanna just 1 minute from her home. Sadly, instead of providing answers, the footage only intensified the mystery. What transpired within a mere 1 minute span? This case has unexpected twists and turns that will keep you gripped until the end. The truth behind Susanna's disappearance may be more elusive than you think. Susanna Morales was born on June 24, 2006, to a Hispanic family. She had a tight-knit family, living with her mom, Maria, and stepdad, Leo. She was the youngest of the family and had 2 older sisters, Jasmine and Jaleesa. Plus, she had a stepbrother she adored. Her best friend was her sister, Jasmine. They were as close as could be, sharing all their secrets and hanging out all the time. The summer of 2022 saw Susanna in Norcross, Georgia as a high school freshman at Meadow Creek High School. She was a great cheerleader and was highly admired by her classmates. Susanna had a sweet and caring personality. People adored her for how she treated everyone with kindness. She also had some amazing musical talents up her sleeve. She had a magical voice and taught herself to play the guitar and ukulele. But that's not all. She was a real people person, hanging out with her friends and, of course, her tight-knit family. They did it all together, from going out to watching movies and planning awesome picnics, everything that could bring them closer. But sadly, the happy days for Susanna wouldn't last forever. July 26, 2022 was just a regular day for the Morales family. Summer was in full swing, so Susanna was on school break, but school reopening was also imminent. In fact, she and her mom Maria had plans to go shopping for school supplies the next day. So around 4 p.m., Susanna came back home after a day out with her mom. She was looking for ways to make some extra cash, especially before school started up again. For Susanna, it was all about working hard and looking forward to the school year ahead. Once they got back home, they took a breather after a long day's work. Around 6 p.m., Susanna told her mom that she was going to visit a friend. This friend, whose name was kept undisclosed for privacy reasons, lived close to the Morales house, just a quick 6 to 10 minute walk away. In fact, the friend's residence, Sterling Glen Apartments, was located just 0.9 miles from Susanna's house on Santa Ana Drive. They were tight pals, and Susanna often hung out there. The Morales family wasn't worried, as Susanna had walked that route many times. After Maria gave the green light, Susanna stepped out in her comfy blue jeans, a sunny yellow tank top, and white Crocs at around 6 p.m. About 6 minutes later, Maria texted Susanna, making sure she'd made it. Susanna texted back, saying she was spending time at a friend's house and would head home later that night. It all seemed pretty normal, but what was about to come would become an unforgettable nightmare for the Morales family. Susanna hung out at her friend's place for a few hours, and a little before 10 p.m., she messaged her mom saying she was heading back home. Soon, 10 minutes had passed, but Susanna still hadn't shown up at home. That got Maria a little worried, so she thought she should check if everything was okay or if her daughter needed a ride back. Maria wanted to know what was going on, so she tried calling her daughter, but Susanna didn't answer the phone. The hours kept ticking away, and there was still no sign of Susanna. At this point, the whole family was concerned, but they started thinking that maybe Susanna had decided to crash at her friend's place for the night, and they wondered if her phone had run out of battery or if she could have forgotten to give them a heads up. So they decided to wait till the next morning, thinking Susanna would come back on her own. But the morning rolled in, and there was still no sign of Susanna. That's when they got really worried. So the following morning, on July 27th, 2022, the family decided to reach out to the police. At around 9 a.m., Maria called the Gwinnett County Police Department, as it had already been almost 12 hours since anyone had seen or heard from Susanna. But here's where things got really frustrating. The police brushed off their concerns and said they had to wait for 48 hours before they could officially consider Susanna missing. Their reasoning for this was that teenagers, especially girls, sometimes run off with their boyfriends or go to parties. But Susanna's family knew she wasn't that kind of teenager. They knew in their hearts that she wouldn't just run away without a word. She was responsible and would always make sure her family knew she was okay and safe. Besides, she didn't even grab any of her personal stuff. No clothes, no shoes, no cash. She'd only taken her purse with a little money, her makeup, and her phone. It was totally out of character for Susanna, as she'd never done anything like this before. Susanna's family had this strong feeling that something wasn't right. They kept telling the police over and over that she hadn't run away, and kept requesting them to start looking for her. But the police just wouldn't budge. They told the family that there wasn't any proof of a crime occurring, no sign of an abduction, no one was hurt, and Susanna wasn't in danger. But the police didn't even want to alert the community to the fact that Susanna was missing, and that they should keep an eye out for her. What made things even more unsettling was that the initial 48 hours are crucial in cases like this. Naturally, Susanna's family was extremely frustrated. However, they were not going to sit around and just wait for those crucial 48 hours to pass. With no police help, they took matters into their own hands and launched their very own search to bring Susanna home. The family hit the neighborhood streets, handing out flyers and asking everyone if they spotted Susanna on the night she disappeared. They also showed everyone a picture of her in her light blue jeans, yellow tank top, and white Crocs, urging them to dig into their memories and recall if they'd seen her walking around or anything out of the ordinary which could help find Susanna. They even reached out online for help. And luckily, a neighbor stepped up with a critical piece of information. He mentioned that he had a security camera outside his house, and it had captured Susanna on the night she disappeared. When the family saw the footage, it showed Susanna walking back toward her neighborhood after 10 p.m. What was intriguing was that this spot was less than a minute from her home. Jasmine, Susanna's sister, had a strong feeling that something must have gone wrong in that 1 minute.
It's frustration of not knowing where she is, not knowing anything, you know? Like, all I ask sometimes is just, I just want to know where she's at so I can get her. Something happened in between the place that we got the camera footage from and our neighborhood, and that's like a minute apart. So something happened in that little minute, and we just haven't been able to figure out what happened.
The security footage left no room for doubt that Susanna was all alone on her way back, carrying her phone, and there was zero sign of her trying to run away. For Susanna's family, this was clear proof that she had every intention of returning back. They brought this convincing evidence back to the police, hoping that now, finally, they'd get some help. But shockingly, the police still hesitated to assist the Morales family. It was like the police couldn't see the urgency, and they tried to downplay the whole case, even though Susanna's family had solid evidence that she wasn't some rebellious teen running away. Their refusal to help and their reluctance to inform the public that Susanna was missing left the family truly broken and infuriated. They were only asking for some basic assistance and a public notice, but it felt like an uphill battle. Finally, under intense pressure from the family, the police started taking action. They decided to check Susanna's phone records, hoping for a ping that would give them a clue about where she was last seen. This information was crucial in piecing together a timeline of her movements. When they checked her phone records, it turned out that on the night of her disappearance, Susanna was walking along Singleton Road between 10:07 p.m. and 10:21 p.m. Then, between 10:21 p.m. and 10:26 p.m., the location data on her phone suggested she was around Oak Brook Terrace near Steve Reynolds Boulevard. But after that point, it seemed like her phone either ran out of battery or was intentionally turned off because there was no more information about Susanna's whereabouts. Now, the police had their own theories explaining this, but they didn't make much sense. They believed that between 10:21 and 10:26 p.m., Susanna could have hopped into a vehicle willingly and ended up at Oak Brook Terrace near Steve Reynolds Boulevard, which was quite far away from the Morales house. But Susanna's family weren't ready to accept this theory. Why would Susanna, who was clearly on her way home, suddenly decide to take a vehicle to a place so far away, especially late at night and without telling her family? Susanna's phone location consistently indicated her presence on the route back to her home, and even the security video didn't show her turning back or getting into any vehicle. So her taking off to another location in a vehicle voluntarily seemed highly unlikely. Susanna's family knew her well, and this just wasn't like her. They were convinced that something horrible had occurred. Unfortunately, even with this crucial evidence, the case seemed to be stuck in slow motion. There were no press statements, no significant progress in the investigation, and it felt like the police weren't really putting in any effort to find Susanna. It left everyone with a furious question. Why wasn't Susanna's disappearance a top priority for the police? Although police were still stuck on the idea that Susanna might be a runaway, there were some concerning questions. Most importantly, could a teenager be on the run for so long without any of her belongings? Susanna's family was doing everything in their power to find her. In the month following her disappearance, they put in tireless efforts to keep her name in the spotlight within their community and followed every lead, even though they all turned out to be dead ends. The family even reached out to news stations to talk about Susanna, desperate to spread the word and keep the case from losing momentum. Jasmine was doing TV interviews, talking about her sister. But it was Maria's conversation with Telemundo Atlanta about the night Susanna disappeared that brought some hope for the family. Now, Telemundo Atlanta played a crucial role in this quest to find Susanna and offered strong support to the Morales family. Marie even mentioned feeling discriminated against by the Gwinnett County Police Department, possibly due to a language barrier, as they were a mainly Spanish-speaking family. Telemundo Atlanta stepped up to be their voice and really helped the Morales family spread the word. There was a specific reporter, Alexander Martinez, who did an exceptional job, putting in a lot of effort to make sure the community knew about the case and to add pressure on the police. Alexandra kept emailing the Gwinnett County Police Department, pushing for updates in the investigation. Most importantly, she asked the one question that was on everyone's mind. Why had the police still not released a statement about Susana Morales? Public pressure was the key to getting the police to take the actions needed, and Telemundo Atlanta was leaving no stone unturned to show the police that they wouldn't let this story fade away. When the community and the public learned about the police's negligence, they started talking about it on social media and TV, forcing the police to realize they needed to solve this case. Thankfully, the pressure actually worked, and the police finally sprang into action, possibly due to the fear of facing public scrutiny. About a month after Susana's disappearance, on August 29, 2022, the police finally released a press statement about her case. This was the very first time they publicly acknowledged that Susana was missing and reached out to the public for help. But strangely, they added that while any missing young person is seen as endangered, they didn't believe Susana was in specific danger, nor did they think she was being held against her will. The community wondered why the fact that a 16-year-old girl who'd been missing for over a month wasn't considered a major red flag for the police. Even if it seemed somewhat common for teenagers to turn off their phones for a night out, it was really unusual for Susana to keep her phone off for such an extended period of time. Most teenagers would have turned on their phones to talk to someone, check social media, or stay updated. Her prolonged silence was deeply concerning. Jasmine felt immense gratitude for the community's support. They were sharing Susana's case on Facebook, Twitter, and retweeting it, spreading the word far and wide. And then, after the police statement, Crime Stoppers Atlanta also stepped in, offering a $2,000 reward for any info that could help bring Susana back safely. The police were at last making efforts to pursue leads and tips that were brought to their attention, and her family was doing the same. Whenever a tip came in, no matter the place, the Morales family didn't hesitate to jump in the car and drive to the location, holding on to hope that they might reunite with Susana. Jasmine, in particular, was relentless in her efforts. She traveled out of state and organized rallies, all in her determined quest to discover her sister's whereabouts. Jasmine also kept a close watch on Susana's Instagram and TikTok, hoping for any sign of activity, but it remained eerily silent. Her family and friends joined forces, organizing walks while holding up posters, urging anyone who spotted someone resembling Susana to take a picture and send it to them or the police immediately. Even as months passed with no word from Susana, the police still clung to the idea that she might have run away, believing nothing bad had happened to her. A police spokesperson also stepped forward and assured the public that regardless of whether a missing person is considered a runaway or not, detectives would diligently follow up on every case and investigate every lead. However, despite press releases, rallies, TV interviews, and community efforts, the case had no significant progress. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, they all came and went, and still there was no word from Susana. The police also didn't release any more information during this time, leaving everyone in a state of worry and uncertainty. It wasn't until January 2023 that the police finally reached out to Susana's family for more information about her case. Strangely, they also requested a DNA sample from Susana and her mother Maria's dental records. This raised concerns within the family, leading them to wonder why the police would ask for such information. It seemed as if they were considering the possibility that Susana might already be deceased and that they'd need this data for confirmation in the future. The family couldn't help but feel nervous about the shift in focus from a missing person to the search for a dead body. During one of the interviews with Telemundo Atlanta, Maria opened up about her feelings of loneliness and frustration. She shared her experiences of traveling to South Carolina to follow up on a lead, and her emotional words were truly heart-wrenching to hear. She told the reporter how she found herself torn between searching for leads in her daughter's case and her work obligations, Her boss was calling her to return to her job in Georgia, but Maria was desperately trying to convey that she'd received a crucial lead in her daughter's investigation. She felt compelled to follow this lead, but her boss insisted that her primary responsibilities belonged to the company. Maria couldn't hold back her tears anymore during the interview because she felt an overwhelming fear. Maria knew she was risking her career to follow an uncertain lead, but she was ready if it meant reuniting with her daughter. Her heart was with Susanna, and all she could think about was what had happened to Susanna, whether she'd been taken somewhere, kidnapped, or left in a dangerous situation. Was she even alive or not? It was in February 2023 when she finally received an answer, although it was far from the one she'd hoped for, a twist that would change the entire course of the story. Around 6:30 p.m. on February 6, 2023, a driver traveling on Highway 316 between Downing Creek and Barrow County stopped on the road to take a phone call. As he spoke on the phone and walked into a nearby wooded area, he stumbled upon something disturbing. As he drew closer, shock set in as he realized that what he'd found were actually human remains. The discovery of the remains was a devastating turning point in the case. The driver found them immediately called the police, and upon their arrival, the crime scene was quickly cordoned off, and the remains were taken to the Gwinnett County Medical Examiner's office. It was there, upon further testing, that the medical examiner made a grim but crucial confirmation. The human remains belonged to none other than 16-year-old Susanna Morales. The identification was made through the DNA sample and dental records that had been provided by her family. This wasn't the news anyone expected. Instead of welcoming Susanna home safely, the family had come to terms with the heartbreaking reality that she'd tragically lost her life. The thought that her lifeless body had been left in that secluded wooded area for so long shattered their hearts. It was made even more painful by the fact that they'd spent months pleading for this case to be taken seriously, knowing deep down that something terrible had happened, yet their pleas had gone unanswered. While it was the most devastating news, it also brought a sense of relief to the family, because finally they knew where Susanna was and what had happened to her. This gave them the opportunity to bring her home, offer her a proper burial, and the resting place she deserved, to create a place where they could visit her, remember her, and talk to her. The Morales family also set up a GoFundMe campaign to help cover the costs of the funeral, and with the incredible support of the community, they were able to raise over $23,000 to honor Susanna's memory. After finding Susanna's body, the disturbing question on everyone's mind was who could have done this to the 16-year-old girl and why? In their quest for answers, the police decided to retrace the events of the night Susanna disappeared once again. After a thorough review of the timeline, they concluded that Susanna met her tragic fate on the very night she vanished, and when the family had reported her missing at 9 a.m. on July 27th, Susanna was probably already dead. Now, to start the investigation into Susanna's murder, they decided to return to the wooded area where her body had been discovered. Their hope was to find clues that could unravel the mystery of what had befallen Susanna on that fateful night and how she ended up in that location. In a twist that deepened the mystery, they stumbled upon a firearm near Susanna's remains. But oddly, there was no gunshot wound found on her body. When they checked the serial number of the weapon in their system, it pointed to a 22-year-old named Miles Bryant. This was not just another turn in the case. Rather, it was a twist no one could have ever expected. As it turned out, Miles Bryant was a police officer working for the Doraville Police Department. So now the police decided to take a deeper dive into Bryant's background, and what they uncovered raised some serious questions. It turned out that Bryant had served as a sworn sheriff's deputy in Forsyth County from March 2020 to May 2021. Then, just a few months later, in September 2021, he embarked on a new career at the Doraville Police Department, where he was employed until the day Susanna's body was discovered. This discovery left law enforcement puzzled because finding a gun associated with a police officer near Susanna's body seemed too much of a coincidence to be ignored. Determined to uncover the truth, authorities started looking into Bryant's actions. What they found raised some eyebrows. It turned out that Bryant had reported his gun as stolen on the very day Susanna was reported missing. In his report, he explained that he accidentally left his truck door unlocked, providing an opportunity for someone to enter and make off with his gun, military ID, and wallet, which contained all his debit and credit cards. What puzzled the investigators was the timing. Bryant filed this report at 11 a.m. on July 27, 2022, a mere 2 hours after Susanna's family reported her missing. And this wasn't all. Bryant was also a resident in the same apartment complex as Susanna's friend, the very same friend Susanna visited on the fateful night of July 26, 2022, at the Sterling Glen Apartments. But it didn't stop there, as Bryant was more than just a neighbor. He also worked as a courtesy security officer for the building. So now, after the police established Bryant's connection to the area where Susanna was last seen, they decided to keep a close watch on him, hoping for any unusual behavior or clues that could link him to her disappearance after finding out that Susanna's body had been discovered. After days of surveillance and additional investigations, the Gwinnett County Police finally issued an arrest warrant for him. On the afternoon of February 13, 2023, Bryant was taken into custody. Authorities also searched Bryant's residence and collected a bedsheet from his car and impounded both his personal vehicle and his patrol car as part of their investigation. A few days after Miles Bryant's arrest, he found himself facing some serious charges. The authorities accused him of concealing Susanna Morales' death and also of making a false report about his missing gun. Although the detectives didn't disclose the details about whether Susanna had been physically assaulted, they were certain that she hadn't been shot. They believed that Bryant's gun wasn't involved in the murder. Instead, they suspected he might have lost it or accidentally dropped it while leaving the scene. Now, after Bryant's arrest, the Doraville Police Department, where he used to work, issued a statement. They confirmed that they were informed on Monday, February 13, 2023, that a former police officer was being served felony arrest warrants by the Gwinnett County Police Department. The city of Doraville and its police department pledged full cooperation with Gwinnett County authorities in the ongoing investigation. Their thoughts and prayers were with Susanna's family, friends, and all those affected by this heartbreaking tragedy. Soon, the police department also held a press conference and described this as an unimaginable tragedy that had deeply impacted both the community and law enforcement. They said that while they were still unsure as to how Susanna was killed, they were sure that Miles Bryant was responsible.
So how did she die?
We don't definitively know. We're still investigating. What we do know is that she died at the hands of Miles Bryant.
The shocking part was that the crime was committed by a police officer, which made it even more distressing. Detectives expressed their strong determination to uncover the full truth behind what happened to Susanna on the night of July 26, 2022. There were many theories about the incident that the police considered, and according to their findings, after Susanna texted her mother slightly before 10 p.m. on July 26, telling her she was on her way home, something happened between 10 and 10:30 p.m. During this time, they believe Susanna crossed paths with Bryant, who somehow convinced her to get into his car. The details of what transpired afterward remain a mystery, but investigators suspect that Susanna tragically lost her life sometime between 10 p.m. on July 26th and 2 a.m. on July 27th. Despite these theories, there were some unanswered questions. Authorities couldn't find any evidence that Susanna and Bryant knew each other. So why would a 16-year-old willingly get into a stranger's car, especially when she was so close to home? Susanna's family also came forward and revealed that they were completely unaware of who Bryant was. They had a chilling theory that perhaps, living in the same apartment complex as Susanna's friend, he'd noticed her going about her daily life and secretly plotted her abduction. The tragic night of July 26, 2022 might have presented him with the opportunity he'd been waiting for, a chance to put his sinister plans into action. On the other hand, police considered an alternative theory that this might have been a random attack. They speculated that Bryant might never have crossed paths with Susanna before. However, that particular night, seeing her walking alone, he might have seized the opportunity to take advantage of her vulnerability. Some even suspected that he could have used his position as a police officer to manipulate Susanna and coax her into his vehicle. While these theories swirled, The one thing the police were certain about was that Bryant's intentions appeared to be deadly from the start. Learning that a police officer was responsible for her sister's death left Jasmine in utter disbelief.
Completely shocked, honestly. I have no words, honestly. I didn't expect it. We didn't expect it. We didn't know what to expect, but the officer was probably like the least on my mind.
The last thing they'd ever imagined was that a person sworn to protect and serve the community could be the one behind this terrible crime. The idea that a law enforcement officer could commit such a heinous act was something that had never crossed their minds. However, there were more twists still to come. Aside from the surprising revelations about Bryant, it came to light that back in 2018, he'd faced accusations of attempting to enter a neighbor's house through a window. When the police responded to the incident, Bryant adamantly denied any wrongdoing, claiming he'd never tried to enter through the window. Strangely, the neighbor decided not to press charges against Bryant, and the matter was ultimately closed without any further investigation. Just when it appeared that every aspect of this grim story had been revealed, there was more to uncover. Shortly after all these news and revelations, a woman named Alicia Bates bravely stepped forward to share her disturbing encounter with Bryant.
He was scared for that. When the officers asked me why he was trying to break into my apartment, I told them that I was scared that he was trying to rape me.
She revealed that around the same time that Susanna disappeared, she'd actually been stopped by Miles Bryant.
This screen grab of a man in military fatigues from October shows the first time Bates says a neighbor's camera recorded him at her door. She says 2 other videos from December show him back there again, covering his face and pulling on the door handle, then again knocking.
Alicia, who's now 21 years old, had known Bryant since the 5th grade. However, as they grew older, Bryant attempted to reconnect with her, but she always felt uncomfortable and uneasy around him.
He's like, I'm in the neighborhood, I'll pull up. I said, no, I'll let you know if you can ever pull up.
So Alicia made it crystal clear to Bryant that she wanted nothing to do with him and insisted that he stay away from her. However, Bryant's response to Alicia's request was far from ordinary. Instead of respecting her wishes, he began to stalk and harass her.
On March 19th, she says someone kicked in her door and she started talking to him because things got suspicious. In December, she says she hid at her home with a gun when the now former Dorville police officer came to her door 2 more times unannounced.
He was so aggressive that Alicia felt the need to protect herself, so she took the drastic step of acquiring a firearm out of fear for her life.
I have a better advantage if I had a firearm at a distance than up close, since he's probably familiar with combat.
She also reported Bryant's disturbing behavior to both the Dorville Police Department and the Gwinnett County Police Department. However, her fear persisted because Bryant was a police officer, and she worried that her complaints might fall on deaf ears, which would lead to no meaningful action being taken against him. On one unsettling day, when Alicia was away from her home, someone made a brazen attempt to break into her apartment. Fortunately, a neighbor had a ring camera that captured the disturbing incident. As Alicia reviewed the footage, she was shocked because the intruder was none other than Bryant himself. In this footage, Bryant can be seen lurking around Alicia's apartment, trying to force open the door and tugging at the doorknob. He even wore a hoodie to conceal his identity. But what's truly shocking was that when Alicia reported this terrifying incident to the Dorville Police Department, there was no meaningful action taken. They did initiate an administrative investigation into Bryant's behavior, but it resulted in no significant consequences for him. Astonishingly, the response was simply a conversation with Bryant, where they told him to cease his stalking and harassment. There was no firing, no punishments. It ended with just words. However, now that Bryant was being arrested for the murder of Susanna, the Gwinnett County Police Department had pledged to reopen Alicia's case, which would shed light on one more disturbing chapter in this unsettling story. Despite her own encounter, Susanna's case was a shock to Alicia. She couldn't contemplate the fact that not only had Bryant been possibly harassing Susanna, but he'd also taken her life. She expressed her deep regrets regarding this tragedy. Alicia strongly believes that both the Dorville Police Department and the Gwinnett County Police Department didn't step up enough. If they'd taken her report seriously right from the beginning, Bryant might have been arrested and held accountable sooner. In her eyes, that could have made all the difference. and perhaps Susanna would still be with us today. 22-year-old Miles Bryant finally appeared in court on March 23, 2023, where he faced his charges. The judge made a significant decision by denying him bond, expressing concerns about the danger he posed to the community. Interestingly, in early March, another troubling charge was added to his list of criminal activities.
Mr. Miles, I'm Judge Brogdon. You have two added felony charges. Do you know why you're here, sir?
Yes, sir.
And do you know what those new charges are?
Yes, sir.
It was related to a 2019 incident when a woman he had attended high school with had her home broken into while she was away. Security cameras captured the intruder, and she also reported it to the police back then, but the case was closed. However, after Bryant's arrest, this woman recognized him and became convinced that he was the person who had broken into her home back in 2019. She returned to the police, not only to tell them about it, but also to emphasize that she'd never shared her address with Bryant. Now there was sufficient evidence to charge Bryant. On May 1st, 2023, Bryant found himself back in court, but this time he was appealing to the judge for bond. The prosecution was also well prepared for their arguments. As Bryant walked into the courtroom in handcuffs and his waist restrained, one of the family members couldn't bear the emotion, breaking down in tears and walking out of the courtroom. The prosecution detailed all the disturbing instances where Bryant exploited his authority as a Doraville police officer and engaged in troubling behavior. This included breaking into women's homes, pilfering their belongings, and even invading a woman's privacy by accessing her phone and stealing her personal videos.
He was on duty and in uniform, asked her to utilize her cell phone because he needed to log into his bank, and instead of doing so, he accessed her videos and sent himself videos of conducting sexual activity on her phone. He is a danger to women in this community. He is has not upheld the oath that he took to protect and serve both the citizens of Doraville and the state of Georgia.
So, despite Bryant's attorney's attempts to argue for a reduced bond, the judge firmly denied the request.
As is always in a criminal case, there is another side to some of these allegations.
As a result, Bryant will remain in jail until his next hearing, the date of which is currently unknown. We'll continue to monitor this case closely, and as soon as any new information surfaces, we'll ensure to bring you the latest updates promptly. Even though this case